Bonnie Ferris's floor.
All right. I guess we can get started. So welcome to the Public Works and Record Services Committee meeting. Just like to acknowledge that we appreciate being able to share the land with our neighbors, First Nations neighbors. So we'll start off with the agenda, and we do have an edition of a pink from Bev Bacon, and also there's an amendment to 4B, which is the special Public Works and Record Services Committee meeting of November 30th. There was a few comments from Carol Voigt that during the meeting that just slipped past. So anyway, we're going to add those. So could we have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Moved by Councillor Gray, seconded by Mayor Little. All in favor? Great, so we're going to start off with a presentation on the chosen extreme heat risk mapping and assessment projects. This project came about thanks to another one of the fire chief's successful grant applications. And reading through it, I thought it was really great. It's very down to earth and readable and provides just a lot of really straightforward plans and projects that are doable in the community to move forward with a plan to keep us all safer. So anyway, please welcome Kelty Craig from Kelty Craig Consultant who put all the work into this project.
Thank you. I'm gonna raise that up here. Thank you. Yes, my name is Kelty Craig, but also just acknowledging I did work with a small but mighty team of collaborators, so can't take all the credit for this work. First off, let's just address the icicle in the room, which is that talking to you about extreme heat on this very cold January night feels kind of a little bit silly. But it's projected that Metchosin is going to have 3 times the number of days above 25 Celsius by 2050, and more tropical nights where temperatures stay above 20 degrees overnight. And after our recent experience with the 2021 heat dome, talking about extreme heat now, tonight, on this cold night, is a way that we can ensure that we're ready for next summer and for summers to come. The Extreme Heat Risk Mapping and Assessment Project was supported by a grant from UBCM and the Province of BC through the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund. And it was really a chance to reflect on the learnings from 2021 across the province, the heat dome that occurred, and recognize that hot summers are coming to us all, even here in Metchosin. The project recognizes that the impacts of extreme heat are not evenly felt, and the research and analysis that we undertook attempts to paint a clearer picture of where greater consequences and lesser capacity for adaptation can result in higher risks. So tonight I'm going to share a little bit about the project process and what we discovered, and then focus on some of the recommendations that are included in the Extreme Heat Response Plan. And there'll be an opportunity for questions and discussion at the end. So in terms of the process, the Extreme Heat Project drew on research into best practices for extreme heat response from across Canada. It then overlaid spatial mapping data with stories and survey responses from the community that were related to extreme heat preparation. And then drawing on the maps and the engagement findings, we explored the potential impacts of a heat event in terms of social, economic, and environmental conditions. From this, a heat impact assessment was completed to better understand where consequences and adaptation capacity result in higher potential risks to the community. And together, all this work informed the resulting extreme heat response plan. So first off, what do we mean by extreme heat? Within BC, extreme heat events are divided into 2 categories. There are level 1 heat warnings and level 2 extreme heat emergencies. A level 1 heat warning occurs when daytime temperatures of at least 29 Celsius are followed by nighttime temperatures of at least 16 degrees Celsius, and those occur for 2 days in a row. And then a level 2 extreme heat emergency occurs when those thresholds from the level 1 temperatures will be met, and there will be a substantive increase in day-over-day temperatures for at least 3 days in a row. And while historically these heat events only occur once or twice per decade, in the future the frequency of these is projected to increase. When temperatures build day over day above a typical summer temperature, the impacts of extreme heat can get incredibly serious. In short, extreme heat can upend regular life, can impact health and wellness to communities, ecosystems, wildlife, can reduce water levels and water quality, impact our livelihoods, and disrupt social and cultural practices. Fortunately, Metchosin has many assets that can reduce the impacts of extreme heat. So physically, as a rural community, there are vast areas of forests and parks, as well as lakes and oceans that can provide vegetation and shade and kind of cooling respite. There are also many formal and informal networks already in place that connect residents to each other, as well as to organizations such as the Neighborhood Emergency Preparedness Pods and the Metchosin Fire Department. And many residents are already in the habit of checking on neighbors, offering rides, sharing resources, all these important things that can help in a heat response. There are also tools and systems already in place here in Metchosin that help with heat response, such as existing public facilities that can act as cooling centers, such as the old school site, the fire hall, and the community house. A strong network of potential partners to work together with on a heat response. Materials and tools to create heat relief kits that can be distributed throughout the neighborhoods. So, cooling cloths, misters, indoor thermometers, that sort of thing. There's a community interest in emergency preparedness workshops, and already many workshops have been held, not specific to heat, but kind of on emergency response. And then emergency contact lists for wellness checks on those that are more vulnerable to heat. So there's lots that is already in place to build on. But challenges exist, including an aging housing stock and an aging community. There are a number of seniors living in old and poorly insulated homes, and other people that are living in marginal housing such as vehicles or RVs that can experience greater impacts from heat. As well, with 1 or 2 person families making up 63% of all households, people living alone can be a concern if these folks are isolated or have mobility issues. Drought is an annual concern, as are wildfires, and concurrent emergencies such as wildfire or other events can pull the limited staff of the Metchosin Fire Department in many different directions. In terms of some of the mapping that we did with this project, one of the maps looks at heat exposure, so it's the surface temperature. And our mapping work highlighted that most of Metchosin is actually relatively cool compared to the surrounding area. So you can look at Colwood to the north there, and it's much more red. But there are a few areas in Metchosin that stand out as having hotter land surface temperatures. These are primarily croplands and fields on both sides of Metchosin Road and portions of Maryhill Peninsula. There's also smaller hotspots that are associated with homesteads where forest has been cleared away, or in some cases naturally exposed land such as Hill Peaks or Garry Oak Meadows. The second map shows demographic vulnerability, so it's an index looking at demographic components that have been demonstrated to have higher vulnerability to heat impacts. And the demographic vulnerability map, the range of the heat vulnerability in Metchosin is actually quite small. So on the index scale that goes from 0 all the way up to 1.00, 1.00 representing the highest vulnerability, the range within the district of Metchosin is all beneath 0.2. So not doing too badly in terms of demographic vulnerability. But again, within this range, there are some areas that have higher vulnerability to heat, primarily the areas closest to Souk Road, while the areas between the coast and Metchosin Road have the lowest vulnerability factor. Adaptation capacity really looks at resources available to kind of respond to extreme heat events. And so this is a map that has indicated many of these resources that are available to residences. And while there are a few key community connection points and physical assets here in the village hub, many resources that Metchosin residents may need to draw on are actually located in adjoining municipalities. So a lot in Colwood, some in Souk, surrounding munis. So that might be food banks, recreation facilities, health services, medical facilities. And accessing many of those resources generally requires motorized transport. So a bit of a concern there. There are other maps in the report, but just in the interest of time, I just kind of highlighted those three, and feel free to dig into some of those others in the report. In terms of what we heard from the community, well, I guess just to begin with, the community engagement that we did occurred in the summer, so it was between June and September, and was really based on three main activities. So we had an online survey with over 230 responses. We did individual interviews, including with all mayor and council, so I spoke with all of you, Shianu Nation, first responders, community organizations, farmers and producers. So we tried to get some perspectives from folks kind of throughout the community. And we also did a pop-up cooling station at the farmers market to talk to the public and to give out kind of heat response kits. So what we heard, some key takeaways. So generally residents feel fairly comfortable and safe in regards to heat, but not everyone, right? There were 10% of respondents that didn't. Nearly 70% of respondents have at least one person in their home that has higher risk from heat. And while some residents are better prepared for heat than in 2021, many are not. So over 60% haven't made any changes since the heat dome that occurred in 2021. In addition, the community is well connected for many, but not all residents. So 28% either didn't have or weren't sure that they had at least two people that would check on them during a heat event. And also interestingly, most people would stay at home or in their yard during a heat event. So there's a strong preference for sort of staying right where they were in their house. So moving into kind of what we did with these findings. So our findings led us to the creation of an extreme heat response plan. And this was really about organizing roles, responsibilities, and recommended actions into 3 phases of the heat event timeline. So you can think of phase 1, plan and prepare, as being the things you do before a heat event. So starting anytime now. Phase 2, respond, is what you're doing during a heat event. And then phase 3, evaluate, is really about kind of reflecting and looking at after heat event. So for each of the 3 phases, the plan includes proposed actions, recommended timing, and considerations, as well as these summary tables that kind of try and boil that all down into a really easy to reference table. And this is just an example of some of the actions within these summary tables. Again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of the actions. You have the report, so you're welcome to kind of spend some more time with that. But just to maybe highlight some of the recommendations. So as we were developing the heat response plan, we considered both what's already in place, and I've shared some of those things with you already, the networks, some of the resources already in place that we can continue and we can build on. But there are also opportunities to consider new initiatives or actions, also thinking about how to bundle those into maybe new planning work that might already be underway. So a few of these recommendations to consider. In terms of communications, we've prepared some Metchosin specific communications, and those are going to be important, but there's also going to be really strong heat messaging that's going to be coming out from the province and from Island Health in the event of heat events. So looking at how to try and amplify those as well. Continuing to operate cooling centers. So for those that need it, cooling centers are really critical. But also looking at how we can try and improve in situ cooling. So how can we make it easier for people to stay at home or at work and stay cool during heat events? And thinking about, is there ways that we can actually bring cooling resources out to people in more remote areas? Transportation is sometimes an issue for folks, especially if they don't have access to an air-conditioned vehicle. And so thinking about whether there's opportunities to recruit paid or volunteer drivers to provide air-conditioned transport to malls, recreation centers, some of those other kind of key facilities during a heat event. And also thinking about promoting available resources to residents. So BC Hydro has a portable air conditioning program. The province has a better Clean BC Better Homes program for heat pumps that can act for cooling. So how can we try and kind of highlight those resources? And then I think also one of the big things is thinking about long-term in terms of the responses. So investing in solutions for more permanent, passive, and active cooling infrastructure can help prevent heat-related impacts rather than just focusing on the short-term acute responses and sort of just addressing those year after year. So how can we try and create kind of more longer-term changes that can result in cooler environments for all of us? So that might be building upgrades, it might be nature-based solutions, such as looking at the landscaping choices we can make that increase shade, restoration with native plants, native vegetation, water conservation, thinking about strategies to help agriculture adapt to the heat. And then to help Metchosin to get the community more educated and prepare for extreme heat, we also created a suite of communication material. So that includes social media posts, information posters, and a brochure that can all be distributed through partners at events. So that's also kind of in the suite of material that was prepared that can help the community. So just to finish up here, the plan outlines the coordination for preparing for and responding to extreme heat events. And really the final step to implementing this heat response in Metchosin really rests on sharing the plan to help ensure that everyone has a clear understanding of the role they can play in preparing and responding to extreme heat. So that is my snapshot presentation, but definitely happy to field any questions anyone might have.
So council, if anybody got any questions for Kelty, and then we will ask if there's anyone in the gallery that would like to come up with a question.
Thank you very much. It was a very thorough plan that you've got. I read it cover to cover, actually. It was good reading. We have some work cut out for us. We need an education plan, but we have the right people in the right place to do that, so that's good. And I appreciate the cross-section of people that you're actually able to reach out to, including our farming community, and we're working on some things as well. So those were all good things that I appreciate. And one of the things that really stood out for me is water supply. Mm-hmm. We're more with these droughts where we don't have that water supply, and we don't have hydrants in some of our neighborhoods, and our marshes are drying up and that sort of stuff. So there's an educational component, some things that we're going to have to address in the future. We will be having some educational stuff on that in the near future. I just wrote an article to go in the local paper about a water day that's coming up. So just to move forward with that. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Councillor Schutten.
Thanks, Councillor. Ms. Craig, when did you do the survey? If you could refresh me, like the online survey?
The survey, so it was in the summer, so I think we had it open for about 2.5 months, so it was kind of June to August.
Okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem, sorry, it's going to be a fun question, but did you ask like how many people have air conditioning in their house or feel prepared for?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I can look up the exact questions. I think it wasn't specifically, do you have air conditioning, but it was, do you feel like you can stay cool in your house? Gotcha. And so for some people that might be AC, it might be they live in a more forested property and so they stay shaded.
Okay. And I was just intrigued by the low level of interest in the cooling centers, which I feel like Metchosinites are pretty resilient and independent, but I think, as we talked about before, when you feel you need to go to a cooling center, it may be too late. Yeah. So that was.
And I will say, in terms of, like I mentioned, part of this work was looking at heat response plans from across the country, and national level, other municipalities that have done this, and that's actually a very common thing. Okay. Is that most people don't want to go to some other facility, right? They just want to stay at home. So I think that's kind of the common finding is, for the few people, not few, but the perhaps potentially smaller percentage of the population that can stay cool at home, they can be life-saving, but for many people, they would rather kind of look at tweaking their home so that they can stay comfortable at
Okay.
home. Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks.
Councillor Gray.
Thanks, Kelly, for the presentation and for the work. I'm really impressed. And this is a nice piece because it fits well with our climate action plan.
Mhm.
You know, we've got, obviously the climate's changing, and as Councillor Donaldson's referenced, trouble afoot with water, heat, and then cold these days. I wondered in the document, the summary table, one of the columns is when. Is that meant to be a yearly activity? Or
Yeah,
is this
so
something you're saying we're going to start now and get this done this
No.
next few weeks?
No, so I think it's just kind of thinking, particularly with the before actions, the phase ones, they're things that a lot of them are going to be ongoing. So it might be, again, making sure that you have supplies ready for a heat relief kit. So that's going to be something that is going to have to happen on a yearly basis, just kind of doing that inventory, double checking that the facilities that have been designated as cooling centers are still going to work. So I think the reason that those dates are in there are, for the most part, as kind of a reminder every year, okay, maybe in May, we need to kind of get on top of these and make sure we're ready for the year. Some of the things might be a little bit more one-off, like because this is the first time that the plan has sort of been formalized. Creating a heat response planning committee is going to be kind of new. So that might be more of a one-off that in the future might just be kind of checking in, do we still have the right people?
Thank you. I must say I'm impressed reading the document that, as you say, we've got some nice things in place beyond the natural environment. In particular, I'm thinking of the emergency, what we call pods, neighborhood
Yes.
pod system. And when I read through, I realized, one of the biggest things in here is connectivity. People knowing about people, knowing who's around, and checking in.
Yeah.
So we're kind of set up for that. And then the communication materials, the other part, the educational aspect. I guess when I look, I think, well, maybe we need a cooling space to see whether or not people have any attraction to it at all. But more important is getting people ready beforehand,
Yeah.
and then checking on individuals. Kel, this may not be a question for you, but maybe to the chair. Leading this material, I think this has come through, as you mentioned, the fire chief. And would the plan be that the fire department would be taking the lead in the work?
I think like in big emergency operations, that would be, there's already a good start on a lot of the things in this plan. And so it's just to move forward with that, I'm sure in the coming months and before summer that we'll be getting together and with the fire chief and moving forward with some of this.
Excellent, thanks so
Some of
much.
these ideas. Won't we? And Mary Lou.
Thank you, Ms. Craig, for your presentation and the report. It's very impressive. One of the things that I worry about is we have a number of individuals living in recreational vehicles, and they must be extremely hot when it gets to be 40 Celsius here. Apart from the BC Hydro plan for eligible customers for the portable ACs, are there anything else that we could do for these folks? We do have, the fire chief has set up cooling center at the school,
Yeah.
and cooling sites, sprinkler sites throughout the community. But besides those options,
Yeah, I
anything else
mean,
we can do for these individuals?
yeah, I think a big thing is going back to Councillor Gray's point just around the importance of connectivity, right? So is someone aware of, connected to, friends with, neighbors of these folks that may be living in homes that are very difficult to keep cool, and sort of willing to go over and check on them and say, it's really hot in here, why don't you come with me? I've got a car, I'll drive you to the cooling center. And so I think building on those networks and trying to make sure that there's sort of no one left alone in those circumstances is, I think, that the other really important piece.
Yeah, it would be the same heat or this time of year as
Absolutely.
well.
Yeah.
Fire chief, did you have something you want to say?
Can I respond to that? Is that all right?
Sure.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, of course.
It's kind of what we talked about already. I think it's a huge question. What do we do for these people? We can, put information out on social media. But I think it goes back to the education piece. Is that we have to connect with them directly, and that's why we have extreme heat kits for example, indoor thermometers and, water, and say, okay, here's the education piece. When your thermometer gets up to this temperature, that's a problem. And educate them and get them to kind of like self-monitor, and then when they need help to call us, and that's building those relationships. So this is a great step moving forward, and while this is extreme heat, the province reacted to the 2021 extreme heat dome, and it took a year to get that out, and then we got the approval for the grant. It's now an extreme weather or extreme temperature. So the next grant that we will be applying for will be broadening this into extreme weather, and then looking at what we can do to, to plan and to prepare for these type of extreme weather events. So is that just, it's not just educating our neighbors to look in, it's also educating those that are really at risk and helping them understand where they need to watch themselves. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, it was great working with you. Sorry.
Any other questions from this table? Does anybody in the gallery have a question for Kelty? All right, then I guess that will thank you very much. I think it's going to be up to us now. As I said, we had a really good start on this, but it's such a kind of an overall community thing. It's not just sort of one group or a few people that are going to move it forward. And that was reading it. I really recommend that people do read it, because it is something that the entire community needs to participate in and to make it successful and to keep us all safe in these kind of events. I thought it was interesting that during the last heat dome that, or it might have even just been last summer, but anyway, that out at the Shawnee First Nation is that they got a deal. I think you may have helped with that, but a deal on air conditioners, and they bought air conditioners for all their vulnerable elders in the community. I thought, I don't know if there's ever a way to get a deal on air conditioners that people may be able to buy, but anyway, I think there's a lot of options if we put our heads together. So from there, we'll move on to public participation. Do you have any scintillating questions for Public Works, Effective Services?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, Beth Bacon, chosen resident. I'd just like to comment. I've sent this to you, but I'd like it read in public in case somebody else would like to comment on this as well. And that's the two things coming up, the dark night sky and fireworks. And what I said here is I really like the idea of having Metchosin be a dark sky community. We already have a big, beautiful, starry sky, but it could be much better. I believe that residents would cooperate if they understood the value of the dark night sky. And it's not just for us to marvel at and for the benefit of astronomers. I'm thinking of being kind to nocturnal animals, for the hunting and biological rhythms, and for birds and insects that just depend on light cues for direction and when to migrate. And thank you for promoting this cause, and I hope it goes forward. I think there'd be good uptake if people understood what's at stake. And I see that you did get considerable correspondence on the fireworks, and I've spoken on fireworks before. It's horrendous for our animals, both our domestic animals and the wildlife, what they must think of the world coming to an end. And there's no safe place to go with all that light and all that noise. And the permission for some fireworks on certain days does not seem to be working. And why should we be the last frontier for this wasteful and potentially dangerous activity? My animals and I find Halloween to be very stressful. We cower and we wait for it to be over. I've had experience with horses, dogs, and cats who go into panic mode. I feel not only for the livestock and the companion animals, but the wild animals who live in our midst and must find the fireworks to be horrific. How can it be fun to create terror for animals? We should be better than that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Sarah Anthony, Metchosin Road. I just wanted to comment on something to do with the fireworks as well. I looked at some of the correspondence, and it's a lot to do with animals, which is of course important, but one thing I wanted to mention was about vets, mostly. So one fun fact about me was I spent 1.5 years in Afghanistan during the war, because I was young and it seemed like a good idea at the time. I was working on the army base, so in Kabul. It wasn't too bad, but there were rocket attacks, there were some bombs, and I spent a few really scary nights in a shelter. And when I came back, I did have issues for quite a few years. And thankfully for me, it's gone away now, but like, it is a really terrible feeling. Those first few years when I came back to, I remember some New Year's just shutting down. It was horrible. Hiding in the bathroom, it was a horrible feeling. It's just like being back in that scary situation. And I don't know how many people we have living here who are, and certainly this is a problem for vets everywhere. I also don't want to take away people's fun. A lot of people love fireworks, but it would be good, I think, if they were stuck to very specific times, maybe not out here, maybe in the city. I know Victoria isn't really doing them anymore, which is maybe unfortunate that there isn't one show that some people can go to, so that might be something that could be connected with. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because I do think it's important, and I felt like it's something I could speak about. So thank you.
Thank you. I think that's certainly a perspective that a lot of us had never thought of. Thank you. All right. That looks like that's it. So I will move on. I have a motion to adopt the minutes of November 27th.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Shukin, seconded by Mayor Little. All in favor? And now the meeting of November 30th as amended. Moved by Councillor Donaldson, seconded by Councillor Gray. All in favor? Okay, and then receipt of minutes of the Healthy Communities Committee of November 28th.
Just ask a question.
Maybe.
Well, just in terms of the school, we've had the news that the instant training's moved out now, and I wondered, are we going to move lickety-split in terms of looking for fixing the bathrooms and doing a new lease and that sort of thing?
Well, that's something, actually, I am having a meeting with our new CAO on Wednesday to discuss the school, so they'll know that. But I do actually have a note that, interestingly, that now that the contractors that are working on the renovations and Instinct is gone, apparently there hasn't been any issues with the toilets.
Good news.
Yeah. Hold that thought. So, yes, so anyway, the receipt of minutes for the Healthy Communities.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Gray, seconded by Councillor Shukin. All in favor? Okay, we do have some business arising from that meeting, and that is on the dark sky policy. And we have a recommendation that Council authorize the Healthy Communities Advisory Select Committee to draft a formal proposal for the district to become a dark sky community. Moved by Mayor Little, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. Any discussion on it? Councillor Gray?
Yeah, I'll just mention, I guess it was in some of the notes, but the MEASC, the Environmental Advisory Select Committee, was also interested in the topic and happy, I think, to see this going forward or for the work to be done, and we'll keep working together if Health Communities needs any assistance, and recognizing what a resident, Ms. Bacon's talked about. I think it is really important with regards to Machosen's got lots of wild spaces and wild animals and the birds and things, so I see it as valuable in that sense, in addition to the issue that people have with horses and their own
Well, I think it's certainly
domestic
can,
animals.
if they can draft a proposal and then maybe send it over to you and have a look at, to your committee to have a look at. I know you can certainly get dark sky hoods for lights, and so it doesn't completely mean people are walking around in the dark. So, but yeah, any other comments, discussion about that? All right, so could we have a motion on that I guess I did move it.
We did.
We did move it, yeah, you made it, didn't you? Sorry, that's what I was trying to look.
Yeah.
I knew it was something like that, so, yeah, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's approved, thanks. All right, reports, well, we have had our report, which was really interesting, and now it's on to a councillor's update.
Councillor Rapp,
Yes.
could I, just in terms of, I'm sorry. Reports. I was going to ask a little bit more about the extreme heat response plan and what our next steps are with this.
Sure.
Yeah, so again, I think very solid work. And do we need anything more in terms of direction to staff or further discussion with the chief in terms of what the implementation plan is? And I have one question on that, but that's a question that maybe the chief can.
Well, I think maybe that we could ask the chief how she thinks the best way to move forward with implementing some of the things in this plan. And what do you think? And we're just going to comment on this a little bit later, but we can might as well do it now. Make it jump up and down.
Do you want me to speak just to the plan?
You can probably might as well carry on. It's my update, so.
Okay.
Sorry.
Regarding the heat response plan, I haven't had time to actually take it through and put it, really focus on it and spend some time on it. But what I would like to see happen is it goes possibly to maybe the Healthy Communities group, and we can start going through it and coming up with some better plan and strategies to the public, and of course our emergency operations group as well. So that's kind of the two routes that I'd like to take at this point, unless you have any other suggestions regarding that. The intent is to take some of those recommendations, and then there are additional grants coming up with which we can then begin to do potentially some mitigation things. So for example, and again, I'm not promising this, but like air conditioning in here. This would be a great cooling center. Also would keep us all safe when we're in our council meetings because it gets quite warm in here. So that would be something that in the future there could be some grants we could potentially get a heat pump from here. So that's the type of thing we're looking for.
I'm going to keep our staff from having heat stroke.
Yes. And likewise having some heat out there too for when it's cold.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You said you had a question.
Yeah, thank you. There is a bit of an implementation rollout which includes the prospect of a meeting with some of the partners. And I think that's a great idea. And you know, I don't know if we've ever had a meeting with all of the pod leaders. We have 3 of you. Okay. I recognize you do a lot of EOC work and emergency prep work. But the one thing that I wondered about as we were thinking about this is, are we taxing our volunteers too much by focusing on extreme heat when in fact there are other things that we might look at as well? So whether it's wildfire risk or just even safe driving or whatever. So maybe the same people that might be involved in extreme heat could also carry through into some of the other risks that we have. So I recognize you've been doing a lot of work on this, Chief, already. So
If I can, it's more of an education plan. I think
Okay.
very much what Councillor Donaldson kind of alluded to was that education plan. We can't expect all of our volunteers to go door to door and do this all education. So it's really, the mail outs, the news articles, the flyers, all that kind of stuff. We are bringing back our emergency information sessions. That will be monthly, of which the heat response plan will be one of those.
Mhm.
So it's just getting that education out. And then through our pod leaders. It's educating the pod leaders then filter that into their pods. So it is a process for sure. And I agree we have to be careful we don't offload a lot of our work onto any volunteers. But I think, so far it's been pretty good. We have our stakeholder meeting, which we do quarterly, which is we try and gather most of the organizations that are here in Metchosin, from the Equestrian Society to Petter Bay, Pearson College, D&D is there, Rocky Point. I mean, everybody sits around the table and we talk about this sort of thing. And we've been talking about the heat response plan there as well.
Great.
So getting that to their employees and staff and that sort of thing. So trying to get the word out as much as possible.
Okay. Thanks.
Great, I think that's, did you have anything else you wanted to add as far as, maybe just an update on what's been happening with the fire department and the...
I can give you a quick update of the emergency program
Sure.
fire department, if now's the right time for that.
Mine as well.
Alrighty. I wrote down a few notes. For 2023, we had 712 incidents, so that's up substantially. Yeah, I will break that down for you in our annual report, but that's just the total number for 2023. We currently have 10 new recruits that have started their training. They will be training now from January to June. We had just received a 2024 fire department grant for $30,000. And with that, we'll be getting some hose, some adapters, some new nozzles, and some other equipment for that. We are coordinating with Public Works again for the ice and snow response. So we're kind of partnering up with that and notification and information passing along, high hazard areas, that sort of thing. We actually had a great example the other night. We had the night of the snow. We had two back-to-back MVIs on Souk Road, and we had a plow that just drove right in front of the engine, which is great because now you have a fresh plow and fresh salt, and you get down there. We're not at risk then as our engines driving down there. So that's a great collaboration there. They carry our radios on their trucks so we can get a hold of them and let them know where we are and vice versa. So it works out really well. Also, just a reminder with all these heavy winds and the ice along with the winds, for power lines that are down, and this goes to all the public, remember if there's a power line down to stay 30 feet away, okay? 3 meters or 30 feet is what you want to stay away from an electrical line that's down. Even if you think that it's dead or you know for sure that it's dead, we have reclosures now that can redirect that electricity, and it's just unsafe to go near them. So keep clear of them and just give Hydro a call and then give us a call, and we'll make sure that the area stays safe. For the emergency program, we have the 2023 EOC and ESS grants. That's $60,000 in total, to which we bought 3 20 by 10 tents, 6 10 by 10 tents, 50 cots, a couple water filtration systems, 3 Starlinks, a whole bunch of laptops, and some other technology. So with these grants, we're really building up the resources that we have inside the EOC and ESS for emergency response. And then we have the 2024 grants that we're currently in the process of submitting for. I mentioned the stakeholder meeting that we have, and that we have our emergency preparedness information sessions that are coming back. And those will be on the 3rd Tuesday of every month, starting February 20th. And I'll get that calendar up as soon as I finish it. I know that fireworks is on the topic tonight. I didn't know if that's something I should speak to now, or do you want me to come back up later to speak to it?
Sure, yeah, maybe come back and speak
Okay.
to it when we get to it. Okay, thank you
Any
very much.
Questions or anything?
Any other questions for the chief?
Okay.
Actually, I would like, can you just, there was that one incident I really wanted you to tell people about, and that was the baby at Lincoln Lake, because I thought that was just amazing.
Yeah, so I received a call just on the landline from a woman who said her baby was choking. I said, okay, have you called 911? Well, no. Okay, where are you at? Confirmed where I was at, or where she was at, and told her to hang up and dial 911. So for the record, don't call the fire department if there's an emergency, call 911, and if you want to back up, call the fire department, that's great, but 911 is the first number that everybody should call. So we started down, and I dispatched, contacted our dispatch, let them know we were rolling, and it just so happened that Gloria, our Fire Smart coordinator of the month, I might add, and a firefighter with us, she was driving by just walking her dog at the beach, and she saw the mother, or at the park, saw the mother freaking out. She pulled over. She actually did her choking protocols for the baby. Baby was blue when she got there, and saved the baby's life. We got there, gave her some oxygen, and then ambulance arrived about 10 minutes later. So definitely saved the baby's life. We actually got an email from the grandparents who, kind of thought it was Souk, and it got back to us, and she was in the hospital for 3 days after that. She has some medical condition that causes her to choke, and they didn't know that she had that. So
Wow, it's amazing.
it's very, very cool.
Yeah, thank you.
So thank you.
Okay, so on to my update. which I didn't have written out again, unfortunately. So anyway, but there is a note that Councillor Shugan passed along that I will reach out. This was on Saturday, during that lovely cold weather that we have or still having. At any rate, and this note came from Michael Morgan at Mile Zero Brewery. And this was on Saturday. He said that they arrived and to find that they had no water. And obviously we're not going to be able to open that day, and realized that it was frozen pipes. So they actually sent a text to me, and I thought it was like, welcome to Metchosin, Bob, because first thing in the morning he's getting a text from me saying, well, you know, school's in trouble, and the pipes are frozen, and the brewery can't open. And anyway, he was out there heading up this way anyway, which was great. But anyway, his message was, Bob reached out to us within minutes and was on his way to the building. In addition, Gord from Public Works arrived with a space heater, and Chief Dunlop brought a couple of additional space heaters as the attic area was very cold and the pipes needed to be thawed. While we were delayed slightly in the evening in opening on Saturday, we did manage to open before 2 p.m. thanks to speed with which Bob, Chief Dunlop, and Gord reacted. So, you know, I think that's really great that everybody just got together and got that done. So congratulations and thanks to all of the crew.
Here, here.
Yeah. So
Councillor, I understand that the new CAO climbed up into the attic and diagnosed the problem, and then got the space heaters up there. So it's a good thing that we hired somebody that was physically fit.
Must have been the contractor. So anyway, as far as public works go, you know, there have been the usual things, clearing storm debris, cleaning graffiti off the school walls, vehicle maintenance, salting roads, plowing, clearing culverts, and picking up dog waste bags. The chief mentioned the stakeholders meeting, they're always very interesting meetings. There were 17 different groups and organizations there. So good discussions. One point was the need to have MOUs in place for local stakeholders to use during disasters and training, so everyone knows exactly what their job will be during that an event. And there's going to be an emergency program exercise on April 30th. Not sure whether it's going to be an earthquake, a fire, or wildfire.
I think it's April 20th, isn't it?
Is it April 20th? I have 3. Anyway, in April, try April, spring. It's going to be in the spring. So I was at a meeting of the West Shore Arts Centre Municipal Committee in December, and it was quite an in-depth discussion. It was really interesting because there was 2 commissioned studies by the Montefika Performing Arts Centre Society, and they spoke about their work developing an art centre accessibility study as well as an art centre feasibility study. And there was really a lot of good tips in there that we can hopefully use here as well. One thing they mentioned, it was very interesting, and they both mentioned this, and in all these things they're talking about space and all the different things that we're talking about a facility. They said one of the most important things to have in a facility is a kitchen. And it said that activities around food are hugely important for encouraging accessibility, diversity, and inclusion for everyone in the community, whether it's cultural or gender or ages or everything. But it was quite interesting of all the things. And hey, we have a great kitchen in our gym, which is pretty awesome. And which is done. The kitchen, the renovations, the 6 washrooms during the gym are finished, which really great. We got it done on time to follow the grant. We had the deadline for the $1 million provincial federal grant that we have. So hopefully things will get open for business in February. Council is going to give first, second, and third reading to the new fees bylaw on January 22nd, then adopt the bylaw on January 29th. One thing I wanted to throw out there, just for discussion, is that we've bandied around that there's no name except the school, the old school. Well, there's that old school, and there's not the part that's not that old school, but it is an old school. Anyway, I was thinking about names and did come up with one, and I thought of that maybe that would get a discussion going about how we're going to go about naming the school. The one I thought of was to deal with Metchosin's whale history of having a whale washed up on the beach, where the name Metchosin comes from, as well as having the whale in the center of the gym floor for decades, which has been greatly recreated by artist Art Brendan for the new floor. Anyway, the name was Orca Place. So anyway, perhaps we'll get some comments on names coming, and maybe council would like to think about some way we can sort of move forward with the naming process. Any ideas? We could have a contest. There was one, I forgot the name, but it could be interesting. There was a story in Vancouver, and I can't remember which part of, whether it was Richmond or Burnaby, but anyway, I think it was the number 2 bridge. It's called something over there, and there was a whole thing, public input. They wanted to change the name. They wanted to get, so they did this whole big public consultation thing about name, and what did they came up with? The number 2 bridge. So, anyways, maybe we won't go that route, but yeah, so it's something we'll think about, maybe put it on the agenda for an upcoming meeting. Right, and that's all I have for my update. So we'll just move on to the final thing on my agenda, which is the correspondence, which of course is fireworks. And I really do believe that it's time that Metchosin took a stand on this. It's just the fun, and they are fun, but it's really not worth it. There's been stories, awful stories really, over the years about all the damage that's caused to animals, and I've experienced it myself, and most of it with animals may have. But so I really feel that it's time to put in a recommendation, and I would move that Public Works and Protective Services Committee recommend that Council direct staff to bring forward an amendment to the Fire Regulation and Prevention Bylaw number 269, 1996 to ban the use of fireworks in Metchosin. So I moved that, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. And now perhaps the fire chief could come and speak to the fireworks, and then we'll have some discussion on council.
All right, I just wanted to give a little bit of background on the bylaw, specific to fireworks. When that was changed, I think it was I don't remember when the last change on it was.
It's about 96, I think so.
And then we changed it a few years ago to reduce the firework usage even more to the 2 days per year. So the existing bylaw, fireworks are allowed October 31st and December 31st only, without a permit. People can apply to do a fireworks, we're talking family fireworks, not commercial fireworks, family fireworks. They can issue a permit or request a permit, and that's an application process to have it outside of those 2 dates, to which we've received 1. So there hasn't, anything else that's been deployed has been in contravention to the bylaw. And yeah, so neighboring communities, I did reach out to the other fire departments around here to find out what they're doing. So Colwood, Langford, View Royal, and Highlands, they all have a permitting process. They do it online, the fireworks course online, and they purchase a permit through their city halls. And RCMP actually does the enforcement on that. CRD, so that would be East Souk, Shirley out in that area, Willis Point, they don't have anything. Like, it's kind of fill your boots, whatever you want to do out there. And Souk, they are currently redoing their bylaw. So they're looking at that. So the enforcement considerations, I guess, from our perspective would be enforcement, the biggest challenge, of course. It's difficult to stop once it starts. So if a family's starting to do that, it's very hard for us to get out there and find it, because we have long driveways, and by the time we get there, the fireworks are usually over. So enforcement is really, really difficult. And then, who's going to be doing that? Yeah, but I think education is really where it would be, and it'll take a couple of years to get in, but if we are going to ban them completely, it's all about the education piece. I do think that everyone's quite aware that animals are at risk for fireworks, but let's also not forget there's a huge fire risk as well, even though I know that it's rainy outside. There's been many fires that have started in structures due to fireworks going awry, and also injuries. So that's another big piece of consideration, not just the animals.
Right.
Just food for thought.
Great, thank you. Thank you. I know the art developing, they say quiet fireworks. So I don't know anything about that.
We started that a while ago, and they're still not quiet. I mean, anything that's going to explode and have sparkly lights is not going to be quiet unless you use drones or something like that. It's still going to have something to it. So it's not going to, I mean, it might help a little bit, but I still think it's still stress the animals out. And it still could be it's a fire risk.
I heard there's some pretty amazing drone shows.
If you guys have the budget for that, let's do that.
Oh, sure. Okay, I think, is there any questions for the chief or just in general? Or?
Yeah, just through the chair, Fire Chief Dunlop, when did the fire department stop using fireworks? Was that a permanent decision?
It was a COVID decision, and then we've just never brought it back. It's always been, like, on a personal note, having commercial large fireworks has always been a high risk. You're talking like 6-inch mortars, and people are, we moved to the electronic firing, but to have, firefighters out there, I mean, it's still a risk. So when COVID stopped it, it never got back in the budget, so we just continued to stop it, and we had a Halloween event this year that was fabulous. So, unless you direct us to bring it back, and we certainly still have licensed people to bring it back, we still have all the mortars and all that kind of stuff, but, that would be at your direction. No one's dying to do it. No one's looking forward to doing it. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Mayor Little.
Yeah, I'll speak in favor of this motion as well, because of the risk of fire, risk to livestock and to livestock and wildlife as well. We have documented information this time of a member of our community that was hurt because of the startled horse, and she ended up in the ER with stitches. And I just think we've matured to a point that we should move forth on batting these in the community. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you. Actually, I had quite a few people contacting me. I don't know if it's because I'm a farmer or because I've been before council talking about this before. This has been the worst year for our own family, and the types of fireworks that have been going off, and not on just the permitted days. It's been all sorts of days. It's been Christmas Eve, it's been days before Halloween, and the caliber of these explosions is I don't even know how to describe their explosions. We have a lot of people in our community, either they have PTSD or they're refugees or they have sensory disorders. We don't know where they live. We don't know who they are. If those people are vulnerable, this is terrifying experience for all animals, pets, livestock, wildlife, and the outfall of that is there's so much trauma to that. Not to exclude the fact that this has a negative impact on our environment, the amount of toxicity that what goes up comes right back down onto our fields. Animals graze, goes into our waters, affects our animals in that regard. The chief has alluded to the safety factors, burns, accidents. Some people are operating when they're impaired doing this sort of stuff. So we live in a fire smart community where, it contradicts all those principles. So, and for Metchosin, in the Times columnist, it says Metchosin is the only one who allows fireworks, and it's just like, oh, goodness. Yeah, so I did encourage people that had phoned me and people who were sharing it online to actually send in letters. It's good to see that. I will definitely be supporting the complete ban. The educational component, when this bylaw was updated in 2018, there wasn't an educational component. We certainly need to go forward now by following up with, there's zero tolerance for this. This is not the community for fireworks at all.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Schuman.
Councillor Up, thank you very much, and thanks so much for bringing this forward so quickly. We all saw the correspondence after New Year's, and I reached out to one of the people and said, yeah, there's already been some discussion, but it's great to have you action it. And I mean, I was trying to think about a reason to not go ahead with this, and I just can't find one. I mean, the balance of right question, balance of enjoyment versus risk, it all just, to me, it lends itself, particularly with the stories we've heard in the type of community I think we want to be toward a ban. So thanks very much for moving on this.
Okay, thank you. Any, Councillor Gray?
Sure, just to say, I'll speak in favor of the motion as well. But I'd like the staff to provide us some advice when it comes back to council about the difficult question that the fire chief has raised, which is enforcement. So who might enforce this? Are we going to ask the fire department to do that, or are we going to turn it back to the RCMP? The second question I'd like them to consider is what sort of fines would there be, and what level of fines? So if we're going to do this zero tolerance or ban, that's where we're headed. I think we do need to answer those two questions. It's not enough just to write it down and sign a piece of paper. We have to figure out what we're, how we're going to deal with the issue and enforcement side. And then the other part would be the education. An article in the Muse would be a good start, but then there may be some other avenues we should pursue. So if those issues could be combined in a staff report for us as this comes forward, that would be a big help for me. Thank you.
And we need to put that in the motion, or do you think that would be just a given?
I'm happy if it just
it'll just do it, yeah.
Certainly.
Councillor Gray? I mean, Dawson, sorry.
I just wanted to say, Sydney actually replaced fireworks on New Year's Eve with a polar bear swim. We could bring that back. See how much fun people have that.
At midnight.
Anytime.
All right, I guess if, Mayor,
Yeah, so they're within the fire regulation and prevention bylaw 269, it does say that any person who contravenes any provision of the bylaw is liable to minimum fines of $1,000 and a maximum fine of $10,000 and the cost of prosecution. So I think that I'd be good with that as well. But it does say we'd have to change the part of the fire chief and the officers of the fire department may enter upon any premises at a reasonable time in order to ascertain the provisions of this bylaw are being obeyed. We'd have to talk about that as well. And I think it's a good idea that we decide who is going to enforce this, whether it's the fire department, CRD bylaw, or the RCMP.
Councillor Gray?
I very much appreciate that, Mary Little. My point again is I'd like to know what those fines are, how they work relative to other districts. Should we increase them, change them, anything like that? So I'm still looking for that advice, if that's okay.
Okay, on that, call a question. All in favor? And that is passed. Thank you. And with that, that does it for this meeting. So can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So,
Moved by Councillor Schicken, seconded by Councillor Gray. All in favor? Okay.
yeah. That is a good question. Enforcement.
Yes, I'll send it to you. Steve, do you need this?
Working for now. So we'll open the meeting of the Environment and Natural Areas Committee for January 15th. And just again to acknowledge the territory we're on tonight, the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and the Sooke Nation, the Songhees Nation, and the Cheyenne Nation. is upon our lands that we're meeting tonight. So I've got the agenda here, and we've got some pinks to add, so if we add those to the agenda. And then I wondered if we might do as we did just a moment ago in Public Works. We're going to have a presentation by Neil West, who's part of the Metchosin Invasive Species Cooperative, and we could follow that after some public participation, just to talk about the recommendations that Neil's brought forward. If that would be the people's, if everyone's satisfied with that, we'll proceed with the agenda as amended. Looks like we're good to go.
Did I give you that dauber, Steve?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, about halfway through the presentation, I'm going to mention what you're seeing in these images here, and there's going to be 7 pages of images. And each one of these images is a holly, what I'm referring to, and it's been accepted by people like Andy McKinnon and so forth, as a holly dead zone. So what we've done is we've limbed that large trunk you can see. So, well, you know the one I mean. And the drip line around a mature holly basically kills everything that's under it. Okay? So Marie-Therese and Jay have been with MISC since day one. And Steve's been helping out for the last while. And I'm going to mention one of the big reasons we were able to get this work done was the Parks and Trails Committee. And I see Brent's here. He was part of that committee when they passed a unanimous resolution to do this work. And I see we got Dan Cote and Katie Nelson here. They're part of our group. And like I say, the 3 people on council have been, Marie-Therese and Jay have been with us since day one. So in the spring of 2018, Mark Atherton and I surveyed the holly problem in Metchosin Parks. That April, Brenda and I made a presentation to the Parks and Trails Committee, and the committee passed a unanimous resolution to remove all holly from district parks. For the next year, a small group of volunteers, primarily made up of members of the Metchosin Parks and Trails Committee, worked to remove holly in district parks. In early May of 2019, Metchosin Invasive Species Cooperative, or MISC, was formed, and shortly thereafter we successfully applied for a 5-year $20,000 grant from the Habitat Conservation Trust Foundation. We have 1 year left in the grant, and to date we have received $4,121. We purchased various pieces of equipment, primarily several polar bears. I'm going to just push ahead one. Yeah, there you go. So there's another holly dead zone. Early on, we had site visits with 5 local experts, as well as local MLA Mitzi Dean, who I believe was instrumental in getting us taken seriously by the CRD, which was a struggle. From summer 2019 to spring 2023, MISC volunteers worked a total of 453 hours in district parks, removed thousands of stems, and on April 29, 2023, we removed the last of the holly from the 5 primary district parks, 230 acres at 0 cost to the district. We manually pulled all the holly we could and limbed those trees too large to pull, up to about 6 feet, to prevent the lower limbs from touching the ground and layering. 65% of the spread of holly is the lower limbs touching the ground, and they'll put out vines from here past the door, and then there may be multiple leaders come up from those vines. We manually pulled all the holly we could and limbed those trees too large. Sometime later, those trees too large to pull, hundreds of stems were eliminated using cut stump herbicide application applied by a licensed contractor and 3 volunteer licensed assistant applicators, applying only to the cambium area, so the outside layer of a trunk. So there's our dog standing in another. That one's not so big, but the trees weren't that big. But you have to realize, you're not going to see a tree in this presentation that's fully grown. And we pulled thousands. You have to get quite large before you get a dead zone. And we pulled thousands of small ones that, according to the science, are mostly going to become big ones because the mortality rate is very low. So in the summer months, MISC turns its attention to Tansy Rag, where MISC has loaned tools out to several other volunteer groups totaling 223 hours, local private property owners for an estimated of 323 hours, Hans Helgeson School for 7.5 hours, for a grand total of 961 hours. After a long struggle with the CRD, on June 19, 2021, we had our first holly pull in Matheson Lake Park. After 178 volunteer hours, we have pulled more than 10,000 rooted holly from an area of approximately 25 acres. Now that's far and away the worst part of the park, but there's holly in other parts of the park. But try and imagine 10,000 mature holly in an area of 25 acres and how much dead zone you're going to have under that, okay? We have been joined by a group of East Sault residents who have been successful in gaining access to East Sault Regional Park as well as the Royal Canadian Marine Search and Rescue property. In the fall of 2023, we were approached by Alex Hoffman-Ellis, a teacher at Westmont School, regarding a group of Westmont students working with MISC on invasives. We are currently in discussion with the CRD regarding Whitties as well as Souk Hills. So the the Westmont kids, there's 27 of them, want to work with MISC, and they seem to have broken through with the CRD to get into Whitties, which Andy McKinnon tried to do about 10 years ago, and they told him to go away. So, why Holly? I've already explained that somewhat, well, for the most part. Now, there's a large one, that's in Metchosin Park. So this is an extract from Andy McKinnon. I sent Andy these same images, the same presentation, basically, and asked him to comment on his feelings, since that's what he studies. Is Marie-Therese probably knows better than I do this, the mycology and so forth, and the underground stuff, right? The soils and what's in the soils. So above ground, an ecosystem's biological diversity and stability depends in part on its species diversity. In a forest den with dead zones, plant species diversity and richness is reduced, and so is the diversity of species that depend upon that plant, including insect species and microbial species. That's a problem. Additionally, by altering the above-ground plant species diversity, dead zones fundamentally change back below-ground ecosystems. Plants represent the major input of energy, carbohydrates, and other materials to below-ground ecosystems. When these plants are removed, e.g. in Holly dead zones, below-ground ecosystems are disrupted with unknown consequences, because according to Andy, that is, in this sort of context, it's never been studied. Removing Holly and allowing dead zones to recover to native plant communities will have the effect of restoring above-ground and presumably below-ground communities. So this is an extract from James Muskelly, who's responsible for the environmental integrity of the Rocky Point properties, which is a huge piece of property. D&D devotes considerable funds to the control of high-priority species like broom, gorse, holly, and others. This from the Invasive Species Council of BC. They sent us a letter of support for what we were doing. Major invasive disruptor of the Gary Oak and fir ecosystems. Cut stump sucker profusely. Can grow in shade or sun. Seeds are easily spread by birds. It monopolizes groundwater. And a lot of the places we're seeing dead zones is in riparian areas, which I'm a high school grad, but I'm told by people with their PhDs that's a big deal. Peterkin and Lloyd, 1967, one tree may produce 120,000 seeds a season. Andy Berger, soil impacts due to the invasion of holly, has the ability to readily establish itself in otherwise undisturbed forests. So it can establish itself in old growth, it doesn't care. Doug Roof's got holly growing under 300-year-old fir trees at his place. Significantly affects species composition and ecosystem function in native forests. Lives up to 250 years. Significant impact to the soil chemistry, and I'd like Marie-Therese at one point to comment on this. On average, 15% more sulfur beneath a canopy of holly. Now, according to my son, the biologist, he figures that would pretty much kill any mammal. So David Stokes and Elliot Church, pictures of an invasion, proliferating and spreading rapidly. Vegetative expansion of tree clumps and long-distance dispersal via seed. So again, it's 65% lower branches touch the ground, 35% where you can go for 2 kilometers and you come across another holly patch, which is what I'm really worried about, it getting deep into more wilderness areas like the Souk Hills, which we're concerned. I've taken the CRD and shown them some big patches in there. So spread appears to be accelerating. Now, all these studies came out of Washington State, and they talk about the ecosystem. It was sword ferns and Douglas fir and shallal, so pretty much identical to what we have. Spread appears to be accelerating. Population and canopy area both increasing approximately exponentially, having doubling times of approximately 6 and 5 years respectively. So doubling every 6 to 5 years. So, but by the time my son's age, there'll be about 32 times more holly out there if we just sit back and watch it. High rates of establishment and very low rates of mortality. And CRD toxic to humans. So that's just about it, but I'm going to talk about what I think we need to do now that we've got the parks cleaned up. Having worked on holly for approximately 10 years and seeing the dead zones as well as holly's very low mortality rate and very dense growth, It's become very clear to me if holly is not brought back under control, there will be a devastating damage done to our local ecosystems. I'm convinced this needs to be done, and I'm also convinced it can be done, because I was amazed at how much work we were able. I didn't think we'd be halfway through this process yet, and here we are, cleaned up all the parks in not much more than 4 years. I thought it was going to be 8, and we'll be sort of patting each other on the back, you know. I encourage the district to lead by example. With the help of MISC, I believe we need to remove holly from all public lands in Metchosin, perhaps starting with Metchosin Boulevards, where there are dozens of berry-producing trees. And we need to do, because there's male and female trees, and not all female trees will berry right away. They need a certain amount of sun. But when you get on the boulevards, that's where it gets lots of sun, lots of moisture, and that's what holly loves. And we need to do what we can to raise the awareness of the public and encourage them, perhaps with the help of MISC, to remove holly from their properties, including former holly farms. We could also pressure other levels of government to stop allowing the sale of problematic invasives by nurseries and florists. So the CRD has holly on its control list, but they still allow people to sell it, which kind of sounds kind of dumb to me. But, you know, so they put the CRD is starting to put considerable amount of money into getting it under control. At the same time, they're still allowing people to propagate it and sell it. So, you know, and there's other things you can replace it with. So that's zone 4, and that is in Metchosin Park. Here's another big one in Metchosin Park, not far from the previous one. And that's why another thing, the science, here's on the left picture, you can see me standing in the next dead zone. So apparently what happens, according to the science, you get these different patches. And over time they spread and they just turn into one great big patch, right? So I don't know if there's anybody here from the Apex Predator group, but if the deer don't have anything to eat, I'm not sure what the predators are going to eat. And it's just, you know, it's that whole cycle, right? And what you should also note is that image was taken in May of 2021, the trees were taken down in May of 2021. That image was taken, I should have put the date on there for that, but I wasn't thinking. But that was taken about 3 months ago. So as you can see, after better than 2 years, going on 3 years, it hasn't really started to come back yet. So I'm not a scientist, but I suspect it's going to take a while for that soil to neutralize and the native stuff to come back. I bet, who knows? But we do have I got an email from Nancy Shackelford, the professor of ecosystem restoration. She's the director of ecosystem restoration at UVic. And she has a student, and that's what he wants to study. It's understory, soil chemistry, and that sort of stuff. So Marie-Therese knows better how big a deal this is. I don't think it's that big a deal, but the kid's not a practicum student, I think. Mm-hmm. So he would be working on a bachelor's, right? But if he says he wants to get into research and research this sort of thing. So it could lead to something like a master's paper or their thesis or what I'm hoping. But anyway, at least it's getting attention. Nancy wouldn't be sending somebody out if she didn't think it was worth looking at, I wouldn't think. So there's another one. That's a smaller one, but again, so what I'm trying to show you is all the shallal and all the ferns and all of a sudden there's just nothing. You see? And it's killing everything. So to me, like I said, I'm a high school grad, but I had some serious concerns just based on what I was seeing, and then Andy basically backed up everything I was concerned about. So one of the things, I thought we talked about the first one. One of the things my wife Brenda suggested about 3 years ago, we had BC Hydro come in and can cut the trees down under the lines to clear the lines. Well, along Happy Valley Road, there's all kinds of holly that's growing up into the power lines. Well, I'm wondering if we could make a deal with them where save yourself from work, just cut the whole thing down, take the whole tree down, and at some later date, you have to treat a stump as soon as it's cut. So what we could do is MISC, and along with your roads crew, if you wanted us to, whatever works. I'm happy to do whatever works. But what we could do is have Hydro take them down, and if somebody, at the convenience of those others, you come along, make a fresh cut, treat the stump, put a pot over it. That's what Saanich does. They treat the stump, put a pot over it, says District of Saanich, invasive control, herbicide use or something. Well, legally, the pot can come off after 3 hours. That's what Rick Hatch at Saanich told me. But he usually leaves it on there for a week or two just to make sure everybody's comfortable. But I really think that, when you're talking about, and I think I missed a part. Did I mention that?
Neil, I think we're running against the clock here, but you've given us a couple of recommendations, and so how about if we just talk a little bit about that part of it?
Sure.
So I wanted just first, we didn't have a chance to introduce Neil when he stood up. Neil West from the Chosen Invasive Species Cooperative. Thanks so much, Neil. This is a great group, and in fact, this year they were awarded the 2023 Friends of the Earth Award at Community Day. And you just heard about the tremendous hard work that the group's been doing. Now, we mentioned my name being associated with this, but I've picked a few. I picked a few ivy stems. Hardly done much work at all. But imagine this: 230 acres, 25 acres, thousands of stems, 10,000 stems. This is a lot of work. The recommendations that Neil's brought to us today involve the idea of dealing with all the on the right-of-ways, but the roadsides and stuff like that. And so I'd like to make the following motion, if someone's seconded, we could talk a little bit about it, that the Environment Committee recommend to Council that staff work with MISC, the Metchosin Invasive Species Cooperative, on the removal of holly from Metchosin Road right-of-ways and boulevards. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Donaldson. Anybody like to say a word about that?
I'm very much in support of that motion, and of course we have to look at a way of balancing staff time and resources, of course, but as you're saying, Mr. West, it is a serious problem, and your photos bring it out actually much more so than I probably previously appreciated, and I've stood in a bunch of holly clearings. Yeah.
One of the things that Neil suggested talking about this issue is that it's kind of a question of timing, and so that if he could work with our new CAO and the Public Works crew, if I may, Neil, what Neil's proposing is that the MISC group would take some action, say, on the length of road, timing it with Public Works, and so that Public Works knows what's going on and not it being coordinated in a collaborative way, rather than striking out on their own and then being a big problem to clean up. So it's more the idea of working together and seeing what they can do rather than dictating just how it would work. But if you remember the very first part of Neil's presentation, they received a large grant. If I may, Neil's a bit of a penny pincher. He's pulled it off without spending hardly anything. And he's, in our discussions, quite sensitive to the issue of the district's resources as well. And so his idea is to work together as able and see what can be done, mostly to get rid of this holly.
Can I make one comment? We don't have, one thing we could do to make it easy for the roads guys, you don't have to cut the tree down right away. I've come up with a method where you take a wire wheel on a drill and you girdle the tree. Because a piece of holly has a really soft, kind of smooth bark, so it's really easy to do. I can girdle holly with a wire wheel. The wheel's about this thick and about that wide. I can girdle the holly in under a minute, and now you can use your dauber to just treat that girdle. So now you're going to end up with a dead standing holly, but it's not coming down anytime soon. So now your Public Works guys can come along at their leisure and say, okay, well, we've got nothing to do. Let's cut down 6 holly and haul them off or something. And it makes excellent firewood, in case anybody's wondering. So, okie doke.
The question will be things like fire risk and that sort of thing. Councillor Donaldson?
Yeah, in speaking with, collaborating with staff, we have a similar situation when CRD Water is putting in, upgrading water lines, that sort of thing, and when they do, we get things like roadside trails. So it's all about communication and what the schedules are as opposed to a one-off. And so with staff like the Public Works and this can communicate and get something going seasonally or whatever, then that would be optimal.
Great. Mary Little?
Yeah, I was just through the chair. Neil, do you have your license now for administering the pesticide?
Brendan and I and Kathy Atherton have our applicator's assistant license. I've often said I'd give serious consideration to getting the full license, but it's going to cost me over $1,000 and a lot of work. And unless I got the work lined up, it's going to justify it. It doesn't make any sense to me. I'd rather pay that young kid we got $1,000 than me go through that for $1,000 worth of messing about with the provincial government. So no. But we've Derek charges out at $50 an hour, and the going rate the CRD's paying is $100. And with Derek comes our 3 volunteers, and usually if there's 4 applicators, we usually have 4 people in the parks. We always had 4 other volunteers cutting, like Gord Stodola and Mark, and cutting with chainsaws. So you're getting an awful lot of value out of that $50 an hour from Derek.
Okay.
So, and we could be working with him on the boulevards if we have this, you know, have the system set up right, you know. So.
Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. So maybe, unless there's other comments or questions, I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Now, the second issue, there was an action I think for myself, and that's that I'll speak to the CRD, the CRISP, the Capital Regional Invasive Species Group, about the issues around disallowing sales in local nurseries and florists. What I've heard before is that these questions of invasives relate to, I suppose it's the free market, the issues that we have there, but I'll have a word with them based on the discussion tonight. Really?
One of the things that we could do as a council, we could send a letter to all our neighboring municipalities asking them not to plant holly, because when we were working, Councillor Donaldson and Shukin and I volunteering at the Sarah Beckett run, as we were going down to the stadium, we all noticed, hey, they planted all these hollies here. So, yeah, a whole hedgerow of bought at a nursery and planted holly. So that's one thing we could do.
I'll take that as a motion.
Yeah, well, I propose that we write a letter to all our neighboring municipalities to encourage them not to plant invasive holly, or any holly, in their municipality.
I'll second.
Second, any discussion?
Just wondering if we include a couple of the other invasives, like the ivy, the daphne, those sorts of things.
Good work.
Good. Is anybody planting daphne?
I don't know, it's been a bumper crop year for daphne, I have to say. I thought I got rid of it all, and it's not all come back, but it is coming back great.
Well, let's take it as the problematic invasives. And so maybe we'll take a vote on that. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Now, I sort of blew it there. I meant to have public participation after the presentation, and if anybody wanted to comment on it, but I welcome anyone who'd like to get up to the microphone at this point.
Katie Nelson, and I just wanted to make one comment. We need to not just send this letter to, we need to not just send this letter to nurseries and florists, because it's at places like Canadian Tire that are, you know, just more general, and Lowe's and all of those kind of places where they're also selling a lot of holly, seasonal, and even, you know, just like, oh, it's spring, it's nursery time, and they sell it there too. So if we could broaden that the scope of where we ask businesses not to, that would be a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was just going to grab this, but we went, in all the trees, we did hundreds of trees. We went through just over 2 of those with herbicide. That's all we used. Brenda bumped into a guy in one of the parks the other day and says, oh, we're not seeing any mushrooms because they sprayed the whole place for holly. Well, there was no spraying. There was, all it is like a bingo dauber. You just daub the outside, and that's it.
Is this yours? Yeah, is this yours?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Will you entertain a related comment,
Please.
Dr. Hollywood? Okay. This is with respect to another invasive species, the bullfrog. I just wanted to speak strongly in favor of the recommendation from Stan Orchard to continue and intensify the bullfrog program in Metchosin. I'm not sure how many members of this council are aware that I was actively involved in the bullfrog control program in Highlands for the last 9 years that I lived there. The 10-acre lake, private lake that I moved where I was a tenant, when I moved there was bullfrog soup. When you swam in the summer, you were bumping into bullfrog tadpoles all the time, and it was quite gross. With a few years of intensive bullfrog control, bullfrogs became very rare. Now, Stan Orchard's program can't possibly be as intensive as the volunteer effort that we put in was, but he's doing a good job when he's able of keeping the bullfrogs in Metchosin to a dull roar and believe me, we want it. We dissected bullfrogs and found them that they were eating the native frogs, they were eating birds, they were eating small rodents. They're a real danger to our ecosystem.
Thank you.
Nicole Shippen, Lavon Road resident. First, I just want to raise my glass to Neil and Brenda West, because the work, the difference they have made. We walk around Matheson Lake Park all the time, and it's just amazing the difference that their work and the teamwork has made. So I also just want to appreciate the report on the evaluation framework for Metchosen's Climate Action Plan. And in the report, there's an idea floated of an advisory committee that would be tasked with tracking climate actions as they unroll. And I think that is a good idea. I'm not so sure about the need for a poll, however, and I'm thinking back to the climate action survey, or the initial survey that happened last year. And one thing I wonder is whether the results of the survey are public, or whether we can have them publicly posted on the website, just see the results of that survey before a poll unrolls. Thank you.
Sorry, could you point me to the recommendation of an advisory committee?
Well, I think it just is in the report, if I recall, or it's some sort of group that would track, if I'm recalling correctly. Yeah, sorry, I don't have it right here, but
That a community group be formed, blah, blah.
yeah. Sorry, it's a community group.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not remembering that exactly, but there is a notion, a recommendation to encourage a community-led climate change and sustainability lecture series, if that's what you're referring to. We can talk about it offline. Let's do that.
I'll have to refer to the report
Great,
itself, but
thanks.
I'm hoping there will be a group that would track the efforts as
We'll
they
talk
sort of-
about that tonight when we get to that agenda item. Thank you very much for the suggestion.
Hi, Diana Smith, 4488 William Head Road. I live near Holly Forest, so I just had a recommendation. When it's on private land, maybe not only talking to the property owner, but maybe if there could be volunteer groups to help do work parties to remove it if the property owner is interested in that. 'Cause it's a lot of work, and I think that people would be interested in that.
Certainly, and I think the track record of MISC is one to be admired, and they're working with private property owners. So anybody who would like to talk to Neil or others, there's a limitless work in Holly. Whether or not there's limitless volunteer hours, I'm not sure, but Neil's been working in the group and working in the parks and in private lands, and now this suggestion lately is to go onto the public boulevards. But absolutely key activity.
Beth Bacon, the chosen resident, and I want to encourage you to keep on with the bullfrog extermination if you can. And I also raise my glass to MISC for all the excellent work they've done. They've been tireless and very effective. What I'd like to talk about, which I sent to you just before I came, so that you'll have this to read before you go to bed tonight. But I want to talk about the action plan. And in my years of teaching, I went to so many good workshops and so many good courses, and I'd come out all enthused and we had all the right ideas. It's the application that's so hard. What do I do Monday morning? How do I transition into actually using this information, these new ideas and these new tools? And I find this a little weak in how we move forward. I think we have all the right ideas for what's needed, but how we move forward is a little unclear. And I think it depends too much on volunteerism. And what I see as being most effective is the work that council can do with the support of volunteers. But you're going to be needing to liaise with other districts, liaise with CRD, liaise with the provincial and federal governments. Only council can do that. I mean, we can do the my teaching friend used to call it the donkey work, but you have to take the leadership role. You can't just say that MIASC or the other community groups will take the lead on this. I don't think that's going to be effective. So I've picked out my favorite bits from the Climate Action Plan, the actions that I think will pay the biggest dividends. I like the big picture described on the last page. That's page 4 here, where it says that there's going to be some designated people who will make it their mission to quote, promote the principle that much of what Metchosen's climate action role is to provide or to preserve the natural environment and take full advantage of the ecosystem services that it provides. Our, quote, priceless natural environment needs to have its value assessed so it is recognized as a prime player in climate change mitigation and community resilience. I think that's excellent. That's the key. And of the proposed actions, I narrowed it down to 6 or 8 that I actually think would be the most effective place to put time and energy. Climate Change and Sustainability Lecture Series. I like external funding for new habitat protection and restoration projects. I like purchase and covenant new habitat protection areas. I like wetland and riparian restoration, invasive species management, climate change considerations integrated into planning and policy development, and groundwater protection and conservation. And the other ideas are all great, but they're just not as powerful. I see these tasks, as I said, being led by council and staff and supported by volunteers. The way the plan is written seems to rely too heavily on volunteers, and the leadership, monitoring, evaluating, and coordinating has to be done by our elected representatives. Since we're at budget time, it seems to me that some of these actions need to have funding set aside for them. It's all well and good to say we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, but you have to budget for it. You have to provide for it, or it won't happen. So I'd like the district, this is going above and beyond here, to really get serious about having a land acquisition budget. We've got nothing in the kitty. When we come to the table, we come with our hand out, but we've got nothing to offer. I think this could be funded in part by donations and bequests, and people get a tax receipt for donating to our land acquisition fund. People leave something in their will to it. I mean, we should have a fund there that when we come to the table asking for provincial and federal money or CRD money or from the other foundations, we have something to put on the table too. And this is the Bacon real estate plan. Is I can picture using the same money to do serial purchases. And the plan is, and this is it's already in CRD's book of tricks. And that's how they got Bilston Farm, and they got what they wanted out of it. They got it in possession of a conservation outcome, and they got their easement. They wanted a service access road in there. They got that. They got it set up the way they wanted, and then they could because they owned it. They could choose who they sold it to and under what conditions. And they accidentally made $100,000 profit. But you can then take that same money and do it again with another property and do it over and over and over again. If you get the seed money, if we got the seed money of a couple $1 million, we could do this plan over and over again and save lots of properties. And there's a lot. I want to skip to the end because I'm probably running out of time.
That's right.
There's a lot that can be done through the process of saving forests, fields, and farms by looking at outdated zoning and bylaws. And people like our OCP. It's generally good, but it doesn't envision large acreages. The district at quote build out could have nothing bigger than 5 and 10 acre lots.
Yeah.
So I urge council, that's last line here, I urge council to look into downzoning options before all our large acreages are gone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Sandra Lamb, Metchosin resident. Tonight I'd like to speak to the importance of and for the protection of Metchosin's wild spaces. Our wild spaces are untamed areas with minimal human interference. They are wind and noise buffers, watershed protectors, air filters, home to animals, birds, insects, fungi, and Kelty's report reminded me shade. Each space is a unique ecosystem comprised of flora and fauna, including old-growth trees. Together they serve as corridors for the safe movement of wildlife. People identify Metchosin as rural with certain lands in the ALR. But let's not forget, Metchosin has wild spaces that deserve protection as well. With the ongoing substantive expansion of Langford and Colwood right next to our border, we must be cognizant to developers eyeing our wild spaces like a weasel in a chicken coop. Let us not let our guard down and give developers the opportunity to destroy our wild spaces. Let us protect our wild spaces and the Metchosin biocultural identity to the extent that we can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Who is that lady? I like her.
Me too.
Sandra Lamb, I believe.
Good evening, committee. My name is Brent Donaldson, Challister Court. I'd also like to throw an accolade towards Brenda and Neil. As a member of the Bilston Habitat Society, they came out one day and spent some time with us in Langford, actually at the Luxton area of Firehall Creek. There's gorse there, and I can't say enough about their enthusiasm. Thank you very much, and I look forward to working with them in the future. I'd like to speak to item 6B of the agenda, enhance riparian area protection. Certainly, the stringent provincial regulations dictate setbacks on the lake, but as being mentioned here several times in different examples, whether it's the fire chief or Neil, is that education. It's great to have bylaws, but most of the folks don't open the bylaw book up. So I think it's really important, certainly from dealing or working with the Bilston group, is this getting folks aware of what's actually happening in riparian zones and maybe articles in the Muse. Education's a lot cheaper than bylaws. Bylaws take staff time and they take enforcement. So I strongly encourage, when we talk about riparian areas and streamside protection, that we consider the educational component, because that's a minimal charge to the municipality. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other takers, maybe we'll move along. Thanks very much to everybody who's spoken this evening. The next item on our agenda is adoption of minutes, the Environment and Natural Areas Committee meeting of November 27th.
So moved. Move adoption.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Schuppen, seconded by Councillor Epp. Any discussion? Read the minutes, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Carried. The next is receipt of minutes from the from MEASC, the Environmental Advisory Select Committee meeting of November 28th.
Move receipt.
Thank you, Councillor Epp. And the seconder?
Second. Move receipt.
Seconded by Councillor Schuppen. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Then business arising on page 23 of the agenda package are several recommendations from the from MEASC. And the first one relates to the Bullfrog Management Project. So for quite a number of years now, we've had a contract with herpetologist, Stan Orchard, and he has some crews that go out and address the bullfrog problem. And you'll see at page 25 of your agenda package, a report that's been provided by Stan for this past year. Things are a little bit slowed in a couple of occasions this year with illness, but in the end, quite a few frogs were picked up, and it's looking pretty good. Our line item budget for this is $3,600, and there's been no change recommended by staff nor by MEASC. And in fact, the motion is, and I'll read it, that the Environment Committee recommend that Council support Stan Orchard's recommendations that Metchosin continue bullfrog control work in 2024. I think it's been a positive thing for the flora and fauna of Metchosin that we carry this on, and we just wanted to bring it before Council, or before Environment Committee this evening. So I've made the motion. Would somebody like to second it?
Second that.
Seconded by Councillor Donaldson. In discussion. Councillor Schuppen.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. And it was interesting reading Mr. Orchard's report. And the one thing that I took heart on is near the end of the year or the end of the summer maybe, we did get reports of bullfrogs in certain areas, and they're here on the in the report, and he just wasn't able to get them. So ideally next year. But but thanks for following this, and fully support continuing the program.
Great, Councillor Donaldson.
Does Mr. Orchard have staff that works with him?
Yes, he does. I mean, each year I think it changes depending on, I believe it's students and others. So I'm not sure the number of crews next year, but he's planning on making a big push.
Okay.
We're billed according to the work that he does.
Yes, I do know that there have been reports, and I know somebody that's interested in that kind of work, so if he's looking for an employee, I know of somebody.
Perfect. I think he'd appreciate the reference. Thank you. So maybe I'll call the question. All in favor? Great, carried. The second recommendation is one about the, from MEASC, is about the Riparian Protection Act, which is the sort of the legislation of the province that governs the protection of riparian areas. And the act itself, the whole idea here would be doing something within and under the act. So what the district might be able to do. At the moment, the legislation exists as it does, and we follow certain procedures in terms of subdivisions and developments and that sort of thing that are in the act, but we're doing the minimum required. And we could be doing more. And so quite a number of municipalities are doing more. And what they're doing is protecting larger parts of larger distances from the stream side, how much is going to be protected. At the moment what happens is that the stream sides are protected up to 30 meters, and then in the event of a subdivision or development, as we saw with the Beckingham development, a qualified environmental professional is brought in, and they say, well, actually, you can get us closer to the stream over here. You can go 10 meters, and here maybe 15, here's 30, and back to 10. 10 being the closest you can possibly get to a stream. Whereas it's possible under legislation that we could declare in Metchosin, 30 meters is the measure for the for a developer, the area that needed to be protected. But moreover, it would be also for established landowners that you would protect that, meaning no buildings or disturbances in the area close to the stream. That's an example. What the motion is getting to is, could we get some advice from staff on doing a better job, or what are the opportunities that we see? And we just heard from resident Brent Donaldson saying, what about education? That would be the kind of measures also that we want to be involved in. So it's not just legislation, but what's out there and what are the things that we might do to enhance protection of, for example, the Bilston Creek. I've spoken to people in the Bilston Creek Watershed Habitat Protection Association. They're quite keen on the idea that there's more that could be done. I have not spoken lately to the APRM, but I saw some material from the Metchosin Ratepayers and Water Protection Association also interested in more protection around stream sides. So this is to have our staff take a look at what's possible and give us some advice as to what we might do. Councillor Schuppen.
Thanks very much, Councillor Gray, and I'm in favor of this. The one concern I have is I feel like we're throwing staff a lot, and it's going to I'm going to help it not intensify, but I'm not going to be able to help myself in not helping it intensify. The one question I might have is whether we can ask, or the Bilston Creek group, or the APRM to come to us with more information. I think it's a great initiative. I'd like to see it as full, as strong as possible in terms of setbacks from the creeks. But I hesitant to ask staff to start kind of raw on this. So I've
spoken to our planner and our interim CEO, Mr. Janowski, about this, and both are feeling that this is something that's readily done in the sense of there's resources available from other districts that have done this already. So there's sort of templates to look to. So I'm not feeling the same tension. It's not an idea of having this done next month, by the way. This is kind of a project. There's some other things that are going on that we are engaged in. For example, we'll be looking presumably at some changes to the OCP related to housing and those other things. So it's kind of like, is this something that would need to fit in there or not? And over a number of months this would be looked at. I wasn't thinking it would be turned around next week or anything, just to get it on the list of the planner so that she might begin to address it, and as she's encounters the question, build, and then get back to us at an appropriate time. Councillor Donaldson.
Yes, thank you for that. As I have asked before, the why question, I believe that our setbacks are very good for this community that is not a high development community, so I understand why other communities are. Bilston Creek in my area has a floodplain, so they have restrictions already. That's just one creek. There are others, and again, there is that educational component. So if people are doing things that they shouldn't be, putting machinery in riparian zones or whatever, then certainly need to be on top of that. Some of the development proposals or variances, different things that have come to us where there's been some new builds or inquiries. Our riparian zones on every one of those reports has been noted, and then the proponent has also gone above and beyond because our OCP emphasizes the protection of environmental areas where they've been required to do things like contact SPIA, and SPIA is a much bigger setback, and we saw that with Beckingham. So those things are already in place. We've seen those come across our desk, and people are abiding by those. So again, the question is why? What has this created for us to now want to go in and make it bigger and arm people more with restrictions and more work for staff and stuff? I do believe that it is working, and if it's not, I would like to hear when, where, and why it has not worked.
Maybe I'll give you a different example. I mean, if you'd like. A different example would be that the provincial government under the Act would allow us to bring in a bylaw that would say when you go to develop a piece of property, if there's a stream on it, and if we declared, I'm going to use the example of 30 meters. Some municipalities have gone 50 meters, but 30 meters. What would happen is that the new lots in the subdivision must exclude that land. So you have fewer houses or fewer lower density development on the property that has, say, the headwaters of, well, an example we just lived through is the Beckingham circumstance, Hewitt Creek. So a lot less of that land would be available to develop, and we would say, as we heard from Senator Len a moment ago, we'd be protecting that land for wild space. So the advantage of this is to protect more pieces of property in Metchosin. It fits with our strategic plan, it fits with our climate plan, that we would move from preservation to protection. So it's to protect this area. And while it may be one perspective that enough's being done now, I'm just asking that we get a look at it so we be better informed. I think there's lots to learn about this. There's actually, and I can circulate it to the committee, the riparian area a guideline book from the provincial government suggesting that municipalities take these actions. it fits with the ecosystem health, biodiversity framework, all those kinds of things. Councillor Adam?
Yeah, I'd support this because I think it's really important. Too often you see, where somebody buys a piece of property and then clear cuts it right up to that little narrow zone. And also when you look at that and you think, wow, that really isn't the current bylaws or whatever we have, the protection areas, really aren't very much. And you see the logging, cutting in this little band of trees that then are really vulnerable to wind and so on around a creek. And I think that it's really important to look at that, especially as you said with the developments that are coming up, such as Beckingham and possibly that one on, I think it's Lindholm up there. But I think trying to have a little more in place, if it's possible, is important as far as those subdivisions go.
Thank you. And I've spoken before, this is not about targeting the Beckingham development, it's well and underway. It's more, or the subdivision applications, I understand. It's more the idea that we've learned from that, how we can lose land and lose protection of some of these special areas, potentially anyway. So maybe I'll make the motion that the Environment Committee recommend that Council request a staff report on the measures available to the district under the Provincial Riparian Areas Protection Act to strengthen riparian protection in Metchosin. And if I could have a seconder for that, I will. Thank you, Councillor Epp. So any further discussion? Councillor Shukin and then Mayor Little?
Yeah, I'm willing to support the motion based on your conversations, Councillor Gray, with staff. But I do think we have to be careful about how much we throw.
Agree, understand. So. And we can have that. Well, Mr. Pat's here and hearing us discussing that, so I think we're good on that front. Very little.
Yeah, I also agree, and I sort of like Councillor Shukin's suggestions that we look to other municipalities, the environmentally friendly municipalities. What have they done? We are a bit bound because the riparian areas are subject to provincial legislation. They're not legislation of the district. And so I agree. We've got the staff with a long list of things to do. We have not that many hours with our planner, and that isn't her expertise, is riparian zones. And so it would be nice if we could get sort of a summary report, as Councillor Shukin suggested, on what other municipalities are doing. I think that would be a great starting point before we consider a staff report.
Thank you. Any other comments? So I'll call the question. Are people clear on the motion? That we recommend Council request a staff report on measures available to the district under the Provincial Riparian Areas Protection Act to strengthen riparian protection in Metchosin. So all in favor? That's unanimous, carried. Thank you. And Mr. Pratt, we can have a discussion just about the timing and that sort of thing in a separate offline. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda was indeed the report from Stan Orchard on the bullfrog management results, and I think we've dealt with that. And the next issue is the evaluation framework for Metchosin's climate action plan. And we heard some great comments from the public on this, and I wanted to clarify, this is not actually the plan. This is a note which I wanted to provide to you for your information on how we might evaluate the actions that we take under the plan. So the important part here wasn't the idea of going through all of the actions and saying, should we do this now, should we do that now, but just so you could have a look at what kind of evaluation criteria would be available. And this was all done by volunteers on the MEAS committee. What kind of evaluation criteria might we use and where the sources of data might be. And so it was to provide you just a sense of, when you look at the plan which we've already approved, the how might we actually know whether we did the job in a few years' time. And so that was the reason for bringing it forward. Now the question I think that arises is, how much work do we want our planner to do on this evaluation? And that's the kind of thing where I think about We've got volunteer time put in here now, saying this is the kind of places we would get. I'll give you an example. When we think about the action at the bottom of the first page, complete extreme heat assessment and mapping. Well, the fire department would probably do that. And oh my gosh, we'll probably get that from the fire department annual report. So not a lot of effort to do it. But we want to show you how we would figure out, whether or not we're pulling off our plan or not. So much of it is just going to the annual reports of the different groups and seeing what data they might have provided us. And the idea of having the criteria, the evaluation criteria, is a sense of providing some advice, in this case, to the fire department, that example, to say this is what we were looking for in terms of knowing did we or did we not pull it off. Now we've got a few things, having mentioned the fire department, the bottom of the first page is underway. The top of the second page, investigate and apply for funding to conduct a local climate hazard and vulnerability assessment. That's already underway with the fire department. And then almost the top of the third page, encourage residents to undertake fire smart home ignition zone assessments, again, well underway by the fire department. So some of the things you'll see, those are 3 examples of things that are already being done, already being taken care of, but they're noted in here as part of our plan, things that we do want to get done. Another example would be the agricultural plan, which is underway with the agriculture select committee. So, and we think we'll get the results there. We'll be able to look to the report that comes. So just to give you a sense of what's there and what I would be discussing with the planner going forward, recognizing the limited resources that we have available for that. And then maybe I would just mention, in terms of implementation, that we do have this almost the last item on the plan, encourage a community-led climate change and sustainability lecture series. And I've become aware of, and I think we're all aware of, a new group that's formed called Reimagine West Shore, which is talking about doing some lectures on this kind of work. And so I've connected with them, and we're going to invite them to come to an environment committee meeting to tell us about what their ideas are. Low cost item, but something around on the educational front. So I just wanted the opportunity to show you what's here and take any comments you might have about it. And I've registered the comments from the public, so I'll discuss those more with Catherine when I have the opportunity. And if nothing today, maybe you've got it, and you can take it under advisement. Let me know if there's any concerns or if you have some better ideas about where we get data or what we might do. That would be terrific.
I just have a quick question.
Yes.
I was just wondering, where did the idea of investigate the development of a waste gasification facility come from?
It came from remember we had a public meeting, public input day, and so one of the participants there mentioned that. Yeah. I think we've had some comments, I think it was at MEASC, where, we're not the size of the community to do that kind of thing. I don't see it as one of the leading items that we'd be pursuing, based on what I heard from MEASC.
Yeah, I would be in favor of going down that avenue at all. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Gray, and pass on thanks to the committee. There's a lot of work that's been put in here, so.
Yeah, Mary Holm did a lot of the effort there, and Bill Cave provided some commentary, and then the committee itself took a good look at it. Thank you very much. So we'll move on now then to Council's update. I wanted to mention that, particularly to the public, that the budget talks are continuing, and I think our next meeting is on January 25 at 4 p.m. in Council Chambers, and we welcome everyone to come to the budget discussions. They're important, and public input would be much appreciated. Now, it was at the Finance Committee, I think our last Finance Committee, where we had some representatives from the CRD come and speak to us about development cost charges. Now, I'm sitting on the CRD Regional Water Commission for Metchosin and for Council, and so there's been some meetings about that, and we had the presentation, which was great, and we also got some correspondence from the Urban Development Institute and a number of others in relation to developer organizations that people are building and developing in the CRD. And they've raised some questions, as I think we heard the other night, about, it's kind of like when you're talking about development cost charges, where you're going to do some improvements in the water system, and you're allocating the cost of those improvements, some to those who are already receiving water, and some to people who are building new houses and need to pay their share. And what we were learning that night was about how the share is going to be divided. So, for example, putting at the moment the CRD made a decision to collect water from the deeper part of Souk Lake, for example. Well, that's going to come to existing users, so we're going to be charged for that existing users. But adding the leach reservoir, well, that's for new, that's adding volume, and that's going to be paid for largely from new development. At any rate, what's happened is the development community has taken, the community, these various committees and associations, have said they're not really pleased with the decision-making process. And I think they're concerned about the development cost charges and what that means to them in terms of house sales and that sort of thing. But behind it is the question about what did the last CRD board do, the one before our term, who approved all the things that are laid out. And so I'm understanding there'll be a briefing provided to myself and others at the regional commission shortly to sort of lay out the justification one more time for all of us. There's quite a bit of consultation done during the period, during COVID time, so it's, I think, a legitimate concern. But the decision was reached by the CRD board that a number of things would proceed. For example, adding a leach watershed, dealing with the Souk Lake reservoirs I've just mentioned, a water filtration plant worth, we're talking billions of dollars here, and then upgrading transmission lines, and there's some other topics as well, transmission mains, like the big pipes. At any rate, I wanted to say we're hearing a little bit about the concerns. We received some correspondence. I think we've all received it as council. And I'll do my best to come back with a report to lay out just the rationale for the initial decision about this multi-billion-dollar investment. Much of it is in relation to increased need for water, but also protection as the climate changes. Things like algae blooms as the water gets warmer, and sedimentation, things like that. Mayor, I heard the other day that you'd met with the mayors, some West Coast Shore mayors, and learned a little bit about it. We could talk back and forth maybe when I come back, and if there's anything extra we should add to a report just to get everybody up to speed, that would be good.
Yeah, and I believe that the Water Commission is going to be briefed on Wednesday regarding this, and it's correct that the previous board did, I think it was June of 2022, made a number of recommendations, and those reports are available online, but fully transparent. The Stantec report was, I think it was signed off by either 8 or 12 engineers. So what they are planning to do is they're looking to the future. So they want safe drinking water into the future, and they're trying to create redundancies in the system so that if something happens, we've got an alternate source of safe and adequate supply of drinking water. And that will cost money. Also, there will be a component of that is a filtration component to that, and that will be expensive. And I've looked through the documents. We had a meeting today actually to discuss some of this, and I applaud the CRD for looking way into the future, because if you look at our past record, and I say ours and other people had looked to the future to today, we are well positioned with adequate and good drinking water. And so I can understand from the developers' point of view that they're upset about this. And they put up this one report, and it was signed off by an engineer. But I also think we have to think to the future, and I applaud people that are visionaries. Yeah, so more to come on this.
Yeah, I'm with you on
But all
that.
of those reports, all you have to do is go to the CRD website and look at that. They're all there.
Thank you. And there's it sounded like there was quite a process in terms of consultation. Maybe that wasn't picked up as much, but the rationale appears to be there. But I'll come back and just lay out whatever I can, just so we're all on the same page, at least with information. The last thing I want to mention was this draft biodiversity and ecosystem health framework that's been put out by the provincial government. It's quite, I think, an exciting document. It fits well with our goal here in Metchosin to support biodiversity as best we can under our climate emergency and biodiversity crisis declaration. And looking at the clock, there's still time for members of the public to send in a note about it. They're looking for feedback up until the end of today. All of council and MEASC have all been encouraged to send it individually. We didn't have the right schedule to get it to a meeting and provide a feedback. I think many people are very happy with it. It's many years coming, and the couple of things that might be that I've noticed different NGOs are advocating for are issues like, could we have some solid numbers here in terms of when the work will be done, make sure the Species at Risk Act. It's mostly about nailing it down as opposed to saying it's not a good report. It's more like it's a great report, but could we be specific in terms of making sure we get it done. So just commending that to you and anyone who has the time before now midnight to get in and comment about it. I'd be happy to talk to anybody who wants to, or would like some references to look at others who've taken a look at the report. So the next item on our agenda yes, and of course, yes, and correspondence from Lavina Rojas, a Victoria resident, about the use of glue traps for pest management. And so we've received quite a number of, a variety of pieces of correspondence on glue traps. And what we've been asked to do is consider if we might be involved in bringing an end to the use of these glue traps. What I mean by that's a road. You've looked at the materials, rodent glue boards, and they're worried about suffering of the rodents as they die, that they're indiscriminate. Birds and other animals get caught in these, and not an effective long-term rodent measure. Now, of course, my thinking was, well, this is actually looks like a reasonable thing to do, but I don't know if the district has a big role in this kind of thing, except to advocate perhaps to the province and or to retail places. So I don't know more about it, and imagine this, I was going to say, well, let's ask the staff to give us a heads up about what we might do, but I'm taking some signals from earlier conversations. Maybe what I'll do is do myself a little bit more investigation about that. Councillor Donaldson.
Yes, well, I think what's interesting in the very first one here, on page 37, is the person is suggesting maybe it gets proposed to the book of resolutions that come up in April. So I'm wondering if yourself and MEASC could put something together in the way of a resolution. The due date, I think, is February 7th for those to be submitted.
Yeah.
So it might be some time to do something like that.
Good idea.
And it's in Victoria this year, so we don't have to travel.
Yeah, I noticed that. I was thinking we might have been out of time, but I could work on that certainly. Whether we could get it, well, let's give it a try. It's the timing of our meetings and all that, and getting back to environment committee and then to council. But good notion. And there's a little bit more research I could do with the BCA just about where the change would need to be made. Sound okay? I'll do that then. Super. And I think that brings us to the end of our agenda. There were the pinks, which we had. Some correspondence from Beth Bacon and Sue Stevens. And one was about the glue traps, and the other was about the bullfrog control program. So I think we've looked at both of those, and we'll just take those up having been received. So with that, I'll call for a motion to adjourn the Environment Matters meeting. Moved by Mayor Little, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. All in favor? And thanks so much. So we'll just change seats here, and we'll be back after our next meeting. Thanks.
My understanding is that the province sets the bar here, but I didn't know that these guys were just that high.
I can tell this is Jay's comment.
But I told I had to stop doing that. Yeah, coach, like coach. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. I remember these. Thank you, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Community Planning Committee meeting of Monday, January 15th, 2024. And committee, we have a set of pinks to add to the agenda, but other than that, is there anything else you would like to see added to this agenda? Can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Mayor Little, seconded by Councillor Epp, and all in favor? Thanks very much. Carried. We have no presentations, and I would like to now public participation. And as you approach the mic, please say your name and the street you live on, and you've got 4 minutes. Please.
Patty Whitehouse, Rocky Point Road. And speaking as the chair of the Dogs and Machosen Working Group, a few months ago, council gave us direction to consider to begin the education campaign that we had recommended, and I wanted to give you a quick verbal update on that. We've had 4 articles in the Machosen News, an article in the Times Colonist, 4 articles in the Machosen News, and I sent out a news release which resulted in an article in the Times Colonist, another in the Gulfstream Gazette, and interviews on CBC and CFAX. I walked into an agility trial shortly after the day after the Times Colonist article appeared, and there it was up on the wall. So it's not just most chosen residents who are being educated about what dogs under control means in the chosen. It's people around the whole region, which is what we hoped would happen.
Great. Thanks, Patty. Anyone else for public participation?
Good evening, Avril Yocum. I'd like to address the PTASC's recommendation for the end of Windfall to be designated as a trail. And I'd like to comment that while PTASC is very successful in developing small neighborhood trails that service all the chosen, these trails can be maintained without overtaxing our volunteers and budget. I applaud this. Larger trails, including roadside trails, are taxing our public works crew, which has had its budget cut. Trails don't maintain themselves. So should we continue to provide more? Currently, the Windfall Moreland Walpole Loop already provides a shortcut for neighborhood access to and from the Galloping Goose by way of the trail off Moreland. I requested a public participation at the Parks and Rec Committee in 2007, which I've attached. I sent out an email very late, so I've got copies here too. To remove Windfall Road from the master plan. It was moved and seconded by Councillor Cockawilla and Mayor Rance to recommend that council remove Windfall Road from the Parks and Trails Master Plan, and it was carried. I oppose the PTASC recommendation of designating Windfall Road as a trail. The undeveloped portion provides a much needed environmental area for the wildlife as a whole. What was that, wild spaces? Is that it? Thank you. We have come a long, long way now, recognizing the inevitable damages to the environment when disturbing natural areas. The other considerations and costs, it would need a bridge and a culvert. There need to be protection for the fish. We're talking Hewitt Creek here. Dogs on or off leash, and who will police that? Fencing, just like Sea Bluff Trail. Protection of adjoining residents and farm animals. And then there's parking issues. So I think I've come probably every second year since 2007. It'd be nice to put this to rest. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. I'll touch on PTASC a little later on. There's a meeting.
There's 6 copies there, so look for Mr. Payette.
Diana Smith, 4488 William Head Road. Could have been at any public participation, any of the meetings, and I'm just confused. At the last meeting I was at in December, there was a bit of a tense back and forth about whether the interim CEO should be seated at the table, and I remember Councillor Gray read out a bylaw that said the CAO should be seated at the table, and I notice our new CAO isn't, and I'm not sure if it doesn't happen at these meetings, it just happens at council meetings, but apparently I talked to Patty and he wasn't seated at the table, so I'm just confused.
Go ahead.
Sure. The bylaw refers to the parliamentarian and the secretary. And at the moment, Mr. Pyatt's the CAO, but is yet to be appointed as the corporate officer. When that happens, I expect he'll be at the table.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah, and I just want to throw something out on this. I think that's to be determined in discussion with council and with Mr. Pyatt especially. It is not common, as I understand, to have the CAO right beside the mayor, the chair of the meeting. I'm happy to work with Mr. Pyatt and the rest of council to figure out the best way of approaching seating in a consistent manner and making sure that we have access to Mr. Pyatt if we have a question or a line of inquiry. So we'll get there. So thank you very much.
Leonore Davidson, 900 and 906 Bayside Lane. I'm not sure if this is a proper place to ask. I don't know if you saw this submission by our neighbor, the Yates, in the Muse. And I don't know if you would like to have a copy of that. I'm sure you all read it, to do with negotiations of planning and such, and our situation where we gave an eighth of Metchosin away, and what happened to him just recently for Christmas. And we also received a letter like that too for Christmas, and we are being sued again because of trespassing on a public road, which is now designated as an actual public road by everybody. And we also have received a letter from the Ministry of Indigenous Affairs about secret negotiations for our property. It will all be kept secret, and there is this all going on in British Columbia, which falls in with Mr. Yates's situation as well. So all this secret stuff, you sort of say, that's ridiculous. If you just sell your property, we'll keep it a secret from everyone until the actual negotiations for the treaties are finished. So you could buy a property and find out you're right in the middle of nowhere land. At least we have the documents, and we do have the documents, and they've now been submitted to court as well. But we all are on that same area of Metchosin. And we would like to make sure that you all back us up, because we have to all been there 77 years. And the Yates have been there longer than us. So just like to bring that to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Leon. Anyone else for public participation?
Eric White, 4290 Chosen Road. At the last council meeting, I heard Councillor Shukin referring to the province's new bill, Bill 44. I think it's important that the council starts a dialogue with the province, because there's a discrepancy in the wording of especially the information package that was handed out and the actual legislation itself. And that comes down to just a single word of or. Councillor Shukin was reading it as and. Basically, it's 481.4 of the legislation, and it says land that is not connected to water or sewer provided as a service by the municipality will be exempt. So it's just important that the word or refers to water or sewer, and Metchosin has water provided as a service. So that will make us fall under that bylaw, and it's super important that we have the dialogue to make sure that we know, is it and or, just to make sure we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's as a municipality. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. I want to just clarify one thing. What came out at the beginning of December was the provincial policy manual related to Bill 44.
Yeah.
And it does do a pretty good job in clarifying that it means both.
Okay.
And both have to be in place, not just one, and if the other one is not in place, you can go and develop triplexes, fourplexes, sixplexes, or whatever.
Yeah.
So you do require both services, sewer and water, to have the bill apply to you in terms of small-scale multi-unit homes. I've got the policy manual here. You can look it up and have a look.
But it's the actual legislation wording, and that's the important part. The policy manual is just a policy. It's the wording when it'll come down to when they, right, that's what applies, and not the policy manual. So it's important to make sure that the dialogue between the province and the council happens to make sure that that wording is super clear and be like, oh, is it an and or an or, and
Okay.
you know, have a dialogue.
We will be getting more information from the province, but yeah, I take your point, so thank you.
Surprise. Beth Bacon, I'm a chosen resident, and I've used more than my share of your time, so I'm going to make this very short. I've got 2 submissions in to you, and one is saying that I really support Councillor Shukin's groundwater resolution for the Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities, and I hope everybody supports that. And we've got a good batting average with getting resolutions passed, so I'm very proud of our councillors for doing that. And the other, I've sent you something quite long that I won't read out, about our aquifer. You know, you can say it all when you say it in rhyme, so I'll just skip to the poem. So there's a lot of blah, 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 10 points and another 7 points or something like that. I hope you've read it. But here is my short rhyme on our aquifer called Too Many Straws. Are there too many straws in the aquifer? Does anyone really know? We can't take water for granted. How do we maintain the flow? Let's start with doing some research that maps Aquifer 606. How are the present wells doing? Is there anything we can fix? Will development threaten existing wells? What's the effect of adding more straws? Are we prepared for future drought? Are we protected by our bylaws? That says it all.
Thank you.
Nicole Shukin, Le Bon Road resident. I also want to lend my support to the groundwater resolution and hope it will be advanced to 80 ICC. And I also want to just speak to a letter that was included in the agenda package from Chris Moore, the president of the APRM. And I have huge respect for Chris Moore individually and as president of the APRM. But the letter proposes, pitches a proposal to the district of accepting sort of a monetary donation to help fund an assessment of the buffer land. And I just wonder if, I would love to hear council discuss some of the possible risks of a kind of monetary donation that could influence decision-making, democratic decision-making. And in this case, it doesn't seem at all sinister, but I can imagine there being cases where, private donors or anonymous donors funding the district to obtain information that could in fact influence the direction of decision-making could be kind of questionable. So that would be an interesting discussion at some point to hear. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. Anyone else for public participation? And seeing none, we'll keep moving on with the agenda. So committee, the next item is the adoption of the minutes of the community planning meeting of November 27th. Do I have a motion to adopt? From Mayor Little and Councillor Donaldson. Any discussion? Councillor Britt?
I had a couple of points, maybe after some questions about the minutes, but after we adopt them is fine.
Okay. Call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. So,
I had a couple of questions. One was about the issue of site visits that we made, and I was wanting to get clear about the purpose of the site visits that we do. Like when you go out there, why are we doing that? And I know you lead them, and I appreciate that. But we go there, we don't really talk to the residents except to get the information from them. So we take the good care to be, we don't really enter into discussions or whatever, we all go together.
Yeah.
But a couple of site visits we haven't all attended together, and I wonder if we're defeating our purposes, and whether we shouldn't make an agreement that if we schedule one, we hold them. If people can't go together, then we don't go.
It'd be interesting to hear the rest of the committee's thoughts. I don't like that idea. Because there are times when we may all be able to make it one day and then not, for various reasons. I found the site visits really helpful myself in terms of situating a proposal that is just 2D for us, and you get there and it's very much 3D. And sometimes you get a chance to meet the property owners and you get a sense of the tangibility to them. That can be a bit of a challenge though, because we're thinking about the broader implications of our decisions, but I'm in favor of the way the site visits have gone, and Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, I would say that they're an asset. It's so much different than just looking at a map on a piece of paper. Get out from behind our desk, get out there, see what it looks like, what the lay of the land is. I prefer to be more informed. The staff do a great job of coordinating us all getting out. There are those one-offs that we've had a few times where people are either a little bit later or they've arranged with the proponent to maybe meet at a different time or whatever. And they don't happen that often, and I think that it's been working fine. I get a lot out of it. It helps me to make a better decision for our community.
Councillor Rapp?
Yeah, I appreciate the site visits. I think it does make quite a difference to be able to see the land in person. I don't really have a problem with us not going all together. I think as Councillor Donaldson mentioned, sometimes for the staff, trying to coordinate council is like herding cats, and I think that they do just fine and the best they can to get everybody on the same page, but sometimes it just doesn't work.
Yeah, so I'd understand each occurrence that we have been all scheduled all to be there, and we've all agreed to be there, but then if we're going independently, it limits this question. We're supposed to be open with our discussions, it's supposed to be transparent, and we're all supposed to be there and not get into details. My concern is just that we either go all together or go separately. If it's okay if we all go separately, then we don't need to bother staff doing the scheduling. I guess I'd say that. I'm just not sure what the rules are we've applied to ourselves. And if it doesn't matter that we're all together, then I've been sort of strict about sticking to the times and that sort of thing. If we don't have to be there together, then that clears up my question.
Yeah, so the staff have made it pretty clear to us to try to be there together, mostly to not inconvenience the landowner. Again, I'll repeat myself, there are times when that doesn't happen. I trust my colleagues enough that they wouldn't be having secret conversations with people. They're there to ask questions and get information. Some of us don't ask any questions at all. It's just listening to what others have to say, walking the land, seeing what there is before us and what the variance may or may not be. Yeah, it's been pretty open, but if I can't trust my colleagues with the oath that I signed and represent this community, then there's a risk at the table.
Yeah, and I personally, I'm not sure we operate on rules, but more of an informal code that we'll try and be there all together, try and, just collect information. That is the purpose of a site visit, is to collect information and go away and use that information to make a decision as we go along. And I know myself, I've had a few times where that information and the actual being there has made a difference in how I processed. And so.
I totally appreciate the site visits too. I think they're a great idea. I think we're doing them on an informal basis. I like it. I think it's very informative. I just wanted to be clear about what, we're doing a lot of organizing to be there all together, and I wasn't sure if that was needed or necessary or how we were proceeding.
Okay. And I would, the touch point or the guidance I would always have is that we should aim to be there all together unless we can't be. So, yeah. But we'll see for the next site visit. So, thank you very much. Is there anything else?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention we discussed the Weirs Beach stairs at the last meeting, and there was a note in the Muse about comments that I'd made here. And I just wanted to be clear so council understood. What I was talking about was saying we had already agreed to have $15,000 spent on the Weir Beach stairs, and I was comfortable with that. But the last meeting, it sounded like the council was thinking maybe $50,000 for the stairs there. And that's when I said, if we're going to spend $50,000, I think we're better to close the trail. I just don't think we can afford that. And so I just want to make that clear to council tonight. I'm in support of building those stairs, just not a price tag of $50,000.
Okay. No, we had some recent correspondence today from a resident and another. I've taken phone calls about what the status of the Weir Beach stairs are. And just, again, for maybe even Mr. Payette's sake, so we got our report from the engineer, I think it was in February of 2023. We took our time to make a decision, but one of the reasons why we did that is we did a number of site visits with the Parks and Trails Advisory Committee and also our municipal engineer as well to look at what the options are. So we came back, PTASC had a recommendation that was brought to this committee and then it went to council. And based on that, we did recommend the more rustic, natural option of $15,000. What came up, of course, is concern about liability. And I will express disappointment that that question came up so late in the process, because we made that decision, I believe it was in May, June or something like that, and there was nothing that came until, I think it was November, early November or something. So, and no work can be done and no deeper consideration. So what I understand is that there will be a new engineer's report or some type of report back that will allow us to, I think more than anything, look at the question of liability and how real it is and what other options we can do to address that. And it may come down to signage, maybe, or a further assessment about what the real risk is. So And that it would be great to see if we could have that report, again, not to put more on staff, but before the current quarter is closed out ideally. So, but great, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is the receipt of minutes from the PTAS meeting of November 21st. And before I ask for a motion to receipt, I just wanted to flag a few things. So we actually discussed these minutes at the November 27th planning meeting. PTAS had met on the 21st. One of the highlights of the meeting was there was frustration expressed by the PTAS members in terms of the engagement they were having with staff and council. And toward that, there was a request to have a joint council PTAS meeting. Now, I understand that that meeting has been scheduled for February 20th, which is the day of the regular PTAS meeting. So it's the third Tuesday of the month. So that's in our calendars now. And one of the things from that meeting is PTAS formed a subcommittee to look at the potential of a roadside trail on Duke Road East. And so the committee is working on a feasibility study. That is our first step. Is it feasible based on technical constraints and budget and just some of the traffic safety issues? So that'll be coming over the next few weeks here. The goal is actually to have maybe the first draft done by February 20th. I should mention the committee has actually met with the neighborhood group a number of times now. There's a lot of work that's been put in. There's a full spreadsheet with the adjacent properties and some of the technical issues. So it's a remarkably organized group, and we'll see what the feasibility study says. That will be done by PTAS. We'll of course get input from the neighborhood group, but it'll come to this committee for more input at time. Okay, and so with that, and I should mention that PTAS is meeting tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. So, and with that, could I have a motion to receive the minutes? Moved by Councillor Gray, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. Thank you, and all in favor? Yes, it's carried.
Some comments.
Oh, sorry.
Because there were some comments that came up at public participation.
Okay, I'm going to hold on that vote. So, okay, thank you.
So I just want to be clear, if we were to look at page 12 of the agenda, where it's under other businesses, the PTAS minutes, 9B, it's proposed rezoning application referral for 4696 Beckingham Road. There are, when we look at the maps, we will see Windfall Road, which is actually a road where people live on, and it comes to a dead end. It comes to a dead end. There's properties all around. There is an easement that actually will go up to Galvin Goose Trail.
Okay.
When we look at the map for the Beckingham development, across the trail there's also an easement for Windfall. So as resident Adela Yoakum said in public participation, there is a concern of the residents who live on the Windfall side of the road where she's at, because this was brought up in 2007. That's how she got to coming to these meetings all the time, for a trail to go through there. So I just want clarity of what it says in these minutes, which side of the Alchemist Trail this is, because there are other neighbors of hers that were here tonight as well, and they actually contacted me, so I actually went and had a walkabout on the property. There's a significant amount of water. There would be needing a bridge. The high water mark is quite high up. So if we have another atmospheric river, that bridge, the footpath bridge, would be underwater. But it just needs to be clarification for these residents that are inquiring, which side of Galvinus Trail are we talking about here?
Okay. I don't have an answer for you right now. I will get back to yourself. I'd like to say I'll get back to the whole committee. I mean, I can. It's I don't know when we next meet, but let me look into it further. Councillor Craig.
The question also arises with the subdivision plan on the right-of-ways that the engineer is suggesting, which I think ties into the question of the trail location. And I'm not sure, but maybe we could find out. I think the application will go to approving officer and the council won't see it. And I just was curious about the road, the road right of ways which lead to the trail. And is that our business at this point? Like, are we permitted to be involved in the discussion? I'm not taking away from the point here, but there's this other question that's arisen along the same lines. And I'm not pressing now for an answer, but I think it's something that would be worth just finding out what our role is versus council on the general question of the connectivity, if you will.
Yeah.
And not, in terms of getting back to us, that might be worth finding out,
Okay.
because I think they're tied together.
Thanks. Yeah.
And the fact that it's actually gone to PTASC and we're actually going to approve those minutes tonight, it would be valuable to have this clarified for the neighbors that are concerned.
Okay.
Especially if that motion has already taken place years ago.
Yeah.
And there's no desire to have a trail on their side of the Galvingus, because there is, as was cited tonight, a connector right through Moreland, and there's a nice loop that goes through. So we need to find some answers for the residents in those neighborhoods.
Yeah. Now, and one point of context is that PTASC's recommendation is a recommendation, so where it goes is up to the developer and the approving officer. One thing that's notable here with this subdivision referral is that it just came with a map, with very little background. And PTASC at that time thought, they'd done the site visit, they'd studied the documentation, so we decided not to do a further site visit. So, but I will get back to you with more information. So, great. Okay. With that, we have somebody's moved and seconder. Call the question. All in favor of receipt? Thank you. Great. So, no business arising, and we have the councillor's updates and a few interesting elements I'd like to get your views on. So the first is a resolution for the Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities Convention, which is coming up in April. I forget the exact dates. But this is related to groundwater, which we know is a significant issue in Metchosin, but also in a broader area as well. Now, the inspiration for the motion is in regards to Aquifer 606, and inspired again by the health and viability of Aquifer 606. But this is an issue that is underway across the province as well. And I get that from conversations I had with people at UBCM at the convention there. And what's striking is that stories and evidence from people in this region say the aquifer is diminishing quite significantly year over year. So for example, in my area, people whose wells have never gone dry are now going dry. Apparently in East Souk, if you were on a well this summer, you were getting trucked water. There were very few exceptions. So we know that's happening. And again, I worked to look at how some of the other communities on Vancouver Island are dealing with this. What's interesting is some have a number. A key thing with the resolution is having more observation wells, reading and working toward understanding the viability of Aquifer 606. And as you look at the observation well network across the island, mid-island, there seems to be a fairly robust, suite of or array of observation wells. As you get further up north, very few. Quadra Island, where many people are on wells, there's only one. So I think this is an issue that actually resonates with the island communities, but also broader as well. And so essentially, the motion calls for more work by the provincial government to identify high-risk aquifers, more resources for the province's observation well network, reporting on high-risk aquifers, and a funding program to support local monitoring of resources. So, and I don't know if folks want me to, you've got the resolution on page 15, and I don't think I need to read it out. But any comments from the committee?
I thank you for doing this. There's great value in it, like you say, not just for our own community, but the adjacent ones and throughout the island for sure. We've talked about a little bit earlier tonight, even with the heat, extreme heat plan, that there's more drought, there's less water, there's all sorts of different risks and concerns. So these types of resolutions are generally well debated and well received at ABIC. It's a pretty exciting local group that then move these sorts of things up to UBCM. I certainly will support this resolution. I also want to add to that Mayor Little and I have met with CAO Ted Robbins of CRD Water and General Manager of the Integrated Water System, Alicia Fraser, and I can't remember the other fellow's name, it'll come to me, but one of the engineers, and we talked about the concerns that our residents here that are losing water, like yourself, actually 3 of you at the table here, whose wells are at risk with less and less water. So I've contacted Councillor Gord Baird of the Highlands, who also is the chair of both commissions, and he did a presentation last summer that several of us in the community did attend, and I'm organizing a Water Day presentation on the 28th in the chambers here. It'll be open to the public. He will come and talk about that, and I'm hopeful that we'll get a lot of our own residents with wells with lots of questions, and there may be even a follow-up to that as to what are some options to get water to our residents. It'll be very, very costly to get piped water in, but there are other options to be explored. And so this will be an information, education gathering just to start the ball rolling. And so falls on the heels of what's going on here, and I think this is a good move.
Great.
I appreciate that.
Okay. No, thank you for that work. Councillor Johnson. Councillor, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I answered almost anything at this point.
Yeah.
I just, I don't know how you want to word this, but I'll put forward the motion that we move forward with the resolution for groundwater protection to the AVICC this spring.
Okay, moved by Councillor Epp and seconded by Councillor Donaldson. Any comments at all? Councillor Gray.
Yeah, just to mention one other intensifying activity under the third whereas would be farming. It's another high user of water. I guess Bilston Creek is currently a high-risk aquifer. Am I correct about that?
One more time.
Bilston Creek is a high-risk aquifer at the moment. It's classified as a high-risk aquifer.
Well, it depends on what you say about like 606 will cover Bilston Creek.
I meant aquifer 606. Excuse me.
That's a hard one to say exactly. I'm not clear on whether it's been designated. Sorry, go ahead.
So it is considered a fragile.
Yeah, exactly.
And high risk, I don't think they classify it as high risk, but they call it a fragile, low producing aquifer that is susceptible to contamination.
Yeah.
So I guess it would be high risk.
Low productivity and highly vulnerable to contamination. And the one thing I forgot to add to this package were the graphs that monitor 606. They're available on the website. They are showing a drop year over year, and particularly, it's only the raw data, but it's a significant decline over the last 12 to 16 months.
Mm-hmm.
So it's...
Yeah, I guess that's the language I'd heard before. I knew it was a problematic aquifer.
Yeah.
I think there's 2 other aquifers in Metchosin, but maybe this isn't specific to that aquifer, it's general, and I like that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point out, when I read it, I thought, great, but it's missing something. So this is monitoring, getting information. And I'm not pushing this, I just wondered if you folks have had more experience at the conventions. What about empowering local governments to restrain development in relation to aquifer and ecosystem health based on precautionary principle? Like right now, we're in a situation where, we've got all the information and it all just keeps going.
Yeah.
And I know it's provincially regulated and all of that, but there's something here about the precautionary principle. We're setting ourselves up for more and more development. I mean, Chosen maybe not huge amount of development. We just have a few, to build out the last few places. But I'm not pushing an amendment for it. I'm just wondering if you want to think about that, or we could do something else. Or maybe it just doesn't fit. You're just interested in monitoring, but there's something else here about action.
No, that's a great point. I hesitate to add that, though.
It may be too much. I just wanted to raise it, though.
Now, part of point 3 in terms of developing regular reporting processes on the health and viability of aquifers is to provide more information or even update what we know. So, for example, there was a subdivision proposal that, is still being entertained by the district, and we received information about how they were calculating the viability of wells. And there was a reference to the observation well on 606, as well as older wells and what they were producing at the time of testing, the proving water was done. And I think there were a number of us who raised concerns about whether that information is relevant at all. So the reporting, I think, will help councils make decisions. That's part of the goal of it. I have to say, I hesitate to make such an activist amendment to this right now.
But it's about monitoring. I just wanted to draw out that other question. And I also want to say thanks to Bev Bacon for her contribution in terms of thinking about all these issues. Many of them provincial, but good things to put forward.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So maybe if this goes well, maybe next year we'll consider something about protecting the aquifer.
For sure.
Rather than just monitoring it.
So Councillor Huff and then Councillor Donaldson.
Just about the time, if we're going to go past
Thank you very much. Can I have a motion to extend this meeting beyond 10 p.m.? So from Councillor Huff, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. Are all in favor? Thank you very much. You couldn't even see the clock. It's behind you, so it must be your sense, spidey sense. Okay, Councillor Donaldson.
Yeah, so in regards to what Councillor Gray is discussing about development, the one thing that's interesting at these conventions is, you'll get up to the pro mic and the con mic, and next thing you know, somebody else is getting in behind you and they're amending it, and so those things could still be coming up in the discussion, and it may be that it does get amended, depending on how you want to craft this. And then once and I suspect this will be accepted, that's how positive I'm feeling about it. When it does go to UBCM, then you probably could push it out more without the development. Who knows? I don't know. I have to sort of feel what the flavor of it's going to be at this next convention, and see what buy-in you can get from the coastal communities.
Okay. No, and that was a big learning for us all at last ABICC, because we had a resolution that kind of cut and slashed a little bit. Still survived somewhat intact, but yeah. Okay. I will. Hearing no further discussion or interest in that, I will call the question. All in favor? Thank you very much. One thing about this is it is due, I think, by February 7th. And I would like to be in contact with staff to see if we can have it on the agenda for the 22nd. Because I think that may be the last opportunity we have. So, okay. And with that, I'm hoping to have a backgrounder for you on that, and we can talk about that further as well, but it'll be nice and short. So, okay. So thank you very much. Next item is discussion on Bufferland carbon offset feasibility study. So when we did the public inputs meeting on the future of the Bufferland, and this is on October 4th, the idea was brought forward by a resident about whether there was any potential of carbon credits through a voluntary carbon offset market, basically from the growth in the trees that are on the Bufferland. And at that point, immediately, I did express some misgivings about whether that was possible, simply because of the size of the Bufferland and the state of the forest there. It is not old growth. It is been logged several times. There are large pieces that have been clear-cut and not restored. There's broom that exists there as well. That said, I did offer to do some further exploration on whether this was something that we could look at further, or whether it had any promise. So through my inquiries, I was connected with Lindsay Smith of the Coastal Douglas Fir Conservation Partnership, And they are part of a program where they received a grant to look at carbon projects on an aggregated basis. So you're looking at smaller land holdings where they come together to form a single unit, and there's potential viability there because you're dealing with collectively a much larger unit. Now, with these projects, as I'm reading and trying to understand them, there's a lot of work that is required to go in and do your upfront assessment about what you have and how attractive it might be to the voluntary carbon offset market. And again, the people that, the companies that might be involved in that are like someone like Van City, Subway, like any company that is trying to get its carbon footprint down that is not mandated to do so, like a power generation company, say. So, what the Coastal Douglas Fir Partnership has offered to do is a feasibility study covering some of the initial basics. Take a first shot at what we have in terms of on-the-ground stuff, the forest resourcing, and where that might fit within an aggregated study. Now, one thing I have to say with all of this, with this concept, is there's a term called additionality. And the carbon credit concept in this context only works if you have land that is zoned for development. And so the value comes because you're preventing development from occurring. If you convert it into a park, you have lost the value of that because it is staying as a park, it will not be developed. But in our case, we have zoned commercial recreation, a golf course is possible, pro shop is possible, homes are possible. So we have something of value there in terms of that. My worry, though, is that something like this, the actual financial value is low, and we get delayed for a number of years considering this, and then we miss the opportunity to rezone to park, which I think is the ultimate protection for the buffer land. That said, the Coastal Douglas Fir Conservation Partnership is offered to help us settle that. Key thing is they say that they will come back to us with a report by late February. This isn't going to drag on for months. I think they have their model and their concept. They just want to have a piece of property, an actual property that exists. So, and I'm in support of this initiative, but at the same time, I'm not so in support of it that I think it should derail the work that we asked staff to undertake on November 20th, which is to look more closely at the Bufferland Working Group's recommendations. So and those are part of the package as well. So that's some background, and I'll get your thoughts. Mayor Little.
Thank you for this. I guess I'm struggling to understand what benefit this would have to Metchosin. What benefit would having carbon credits to Van City do for Metchosin in terms of how do we move forward with management of that 112 acres? I mean, the recommendations for converting it to a park, that does have an objective, and it would help with the protection of that area from development. I mean, I think if we were, I just struggle to understand what we're going to get out of it.
Yeah, I mean, the simple answer is, well, it's not that simple. If you found you had a viable asset there, and you found somebody who would purchase it from you, the ultimate answer is money, revenue. But there are a whole bunch of complexities and questions, and you essentially have to go to market with what you've got. So again, it's a legitimate question you ask, is how do we manage the land, and what, like, say we found ourselves in this, what, prohibitions are to developing, or not developing, but turning it into a park asset. And there might not be too many, but, park, not rezone it to park, but maintaining trails, etc. So
I'm just wondering if it goes against, the end result goes against what the Bufferlands Working Group had recommended. It is a little bit contrary to what has been recommended by the by the.
Yeah. No, and that is fair enough too. We considered it. Councillor Donaldson was there as well, and it was not high on the, like it didn't even make the list. In the report itself, I've carved out a section there. It just talks about there are higher priorities that the Bufferland Working Group sought than carbon credits. So, yeah, fair point.
And then the last point that I had was I understand that this type of scenario would really apply to second or first, probably but second or third growth trees on hundreds, thousands of hectares of land, not necessarily 112. I mean, that piece of land is valuable to us in Metchosin, but and I question whether it would be valuable in a carbon offset scenario.
Yeah. Councillor Gray?
Thanks for doing the work of contacting the people and doing that. It's the same group actually that's recommending that we put in riparian area regulations. So that's kind of interesting. But it seems that this is a low risk item that the Coastal Douglas Fir Group are interested in giving us a hand, take a look at it by next month, and we'll know whether or not there's something there or not. So I think it's worth pursuing. It's not going to slow us down. We're moving at a glacial speed at the moment. So you can't go much slower than what we're doing. And why don't we find out? I mean, that would be my perspective. Let's just get it looked before we come back to that other motion. I mean, the Bufferland Working Group was going to also define the ecological buffer, what it would look like in terms of designating a park and the basis of a resource plan, to help the staff, do their part. We have to we have a bunch of work to do on this, and during that time, these people will be back to us.
Yeah. I
should. There's a risk, is there?
I don't think there's so much a risk of doing the work.
Yeah.
What there is a risk is that collectively and imaginatively we get distracted. That to me is the risk. But I think it's I think it's worth pursuing. And the one thing I have to clarify though is what we're really now waiting for is the staff report on the Bufferland recommendations. So I have delivered to our planner a general report about what the concept of a protected ecological buffer would be based on, further digging into the report itself, the recommendation report. So she's got what material we can provide to her to start doing the work. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, but Councillor Johns or Councillor Rabb, pardon me.
Yeah, I don't really think it is going to be that helpful for us for the buffer. I think just kind of in general, the overall big picture, and it's not costing us anything. So I think that they really want to establish how aggregate carbon projects could work in communities with smaller areas of land. And so I think to their credit, it would be really good for just people in general, municipalities in general, to have some kind of criteria set up so that they would just know, just like we wouldn't have to be going through this, sort of question and answer. We'd be able, there'd be something set up. We could just look at it and say, yes, we might qualify, no, we won't qualify, or it'd be good for us. So I think looking at the big picture, that it's would be good to have them go ahead and, we don't have to do anything with it after we get their report.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Donaldson, your views?
Yeah, I don't see coming out of the buffer working group. This was something that definitely wasn't embraced. Having said that, in reading this and listening to what you're saying, is there a cost to us? No. Will it benefit us? Possibly not. But out of curiosity, is it going to hurt anything? It's more information, but does it open up the door for more than to come in? On other properties we have, where that I don't know. There's unknowns. I don't know that there's a risk. So there don't think it'll change our staff report and what we've done so far with the working group.
Yeah.
I think that that's pretty solid, our report.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments? Councilor
Motion?
Sure.
That
please.
Planning Committee recommend that council agree to enter a study on carbon offsetting feasibility with the Coastal Douglas Fir Conservation Partnership.
Well said. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Epp seconds that. So further discussion. The one thing that just hit me this morning that we probably have to do is work out some form of agreement about information sharing. And my understanding, though, is that the Coastal Douglas Fir Partnership can basically use publicly available information. They'll probably walk through the buffer land. There's no requirement to get our permission for that. So, but there's probably some paperwork that we have to deal with as well. So, but great. Any other comments before we call the question? Councilor Donaldson?
So how much staff time is this going to take?
Well, it shouldn't take any. No.
It's strictly this company?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, we come to the table with initiatives that take no staff time. Magical. Yes.
Awesome.
Okay. So I will call the question. All in favor? And carried. Thank you so much. Great. And just a few more items on my update. Excuse me 1 second. I just will mention again, the next PTASK meeting is tomorrow night at 7, and that's about it. Thank you very much. That's the councillor's update. So next we go to correspondence, and on our correspondence package we have a number of items from Patty Whitehouse in her role as the chair of the Dogs and Chosen Working Group. And the nature of this is around the dog poop receptacles. And Ms. Whitehouse's correspondence is well received, and I confess I probably missed something here. In terms of understanding what the signs were intended to be once they were discussed. That said, I feel like there is a process element that we missed as a council on this, and particularly because of the cost that we've now become aware of in terms of managing those receptacles over a period of time. It's in the order of $27,000, and that is, it's almost a 1% tax increase for us. So given the weight of that, I think I would recommend and would like to seek a further discussion even at the Finance Committee about the viability of maintaining that. Again, that cost is so significant that I know we've incurred cost in terms of putting up the signs and removing the material that's come in, but I think maintaining it is highly challenging for us, especially this year. So, Councillor Donaldson.
Yeah, I think for me, the part that was missing, and I'm basing it on what I've seen in the last term, when there were signs or educational programs or whatever, there was a full discussion at the table. And two examples of that were, and this is where the working group came out of, was the concerns of dogs and livestock on Still Meadow Farm. And there was a lot of dialogue, like say, at the table about the style of sign. There's different examples given and that sort of thing, costs, and the other one was Squamish Farm, when there was problems with trespassing on private property and that sort of thing. So there was a lot of deliberation at the table, and so I guess that's where that was missed. And I don't know if that was. I expected it would happen. I was also on the dog working group, so I do remember the dialogue, and the idea of leave no trace and receptacles and all sorts of different ideas that the group worked through. So for me, the part that was missing is getting quotes on these receptacles, as well as how much labor was going to be involved. And this is just winter costs. This cost could double come warmer months and more people out and, you know, having to empty the receptacles more and more. So we've invested so far in the 2 receptacles with signage at $1,000 each, approximately. And so the $27,000 is an estimate in the budget for the labor, because to collect it, we have to also dispose of it, and none of the garbage collecting companies will take it, so it means our staff has to go out to Parkland Road. So that's involved. CRD is not interested in a contract. That's not something they do, even though they're doing their own all along the Galapagos Trail and the beaches and parks that they do have here. So those are the 2 parts that were a little bit alarming. We will be discussing this at the budget special finance meeting on the 25th, because it is in the operating budget. And so I'll be looking at the committee for some feedback on that. So. It could be that we just do this as a trial basis and see how it goes. I don't know, but again, we will discuss that further at the budget table and see if we want to fork out that kind of money, and it's a significant sum.
Yeah. Further comments? Councillor?
Great idea. I'm happy to discuss it at the finance table.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks very much. Last piece of correspondence is from Chris Moore, President of the APRM. It's on page 35. We've had one public participation comment on this. Sorry. 35. Okay, so this is the letter requests an independent appraisal of the value of the bufferland. Now, this is an idea that was also heard at the final meeting of the Bufferland Working Group, the public input session. And I've since talked to Ms. Moore a number of times, and also other community members as well. I have to say, I do not see the rationale or the value of doing this right now, and I've asked for more information in terms of what it might be used for. The reason you go get an appraisal is you're likely going to sell all or part of your property. In terms of this context, the value of it is not so much for selling necessarily, but it's attracting further partners. And in terms of questions around that, I have not had anything near, to my mind, a satisfactory answer as to what it possibly could look like, or the value that it would come and what an appraisal would be. So I recognize we've had this letter and this idea, so I'm not seeing where it would go, but value your comments and your input, committee. Councillor Johnson?
Yeah, this came up quite late in the working group. I believe it was presented from another resident along the same lines, or something like it, in the last public engagement or thereafter. And I'm like yourself, wondering what the purpose of it is to us. Why do we do this? But the first thing that comes to mind is what resident Ms. Schuken had mentioned, and for me it was optics of taking money from an organized lobbyist group. I think it's very generous. I think it's something they can actually do. They can do an appraisal on the land, I suspect. For whatever the benefit of that is. I don't know if we were to engage in starting to take large sums of money or donations or whatever. The optics of it alone are I'm uncertain about, but and the full purpose, yeah, I'm not clear other than maybe partnerships with different conservation groups or something maybe. I don't know. At this time, I don't know that we need to appraise it because we're not selling it
Yeah.
yet.
The plan right now is
It was pretty clear what the residents had said prior when it first came up for sale.
Okay.
They sort of pushed back.
Sorry, Councillor Gray, and just one point of context. I think if the district were to undertake some sort of appraisal, it would almost certainly be confidential and used for our purposes. So that's something to keep in mind with that. That's my bet. So but Councillor Gray.
Yeah, just on the last point, Councillor Donaldson, I think the pushback from the community resulted because the last council didn't get an appraisal, so we just were saying, it doesn't seem like enough money, but we didn't actually have the independent appraisal. So we'll need it at some point if there is a move to sell. The point that was made about this in the previous discussions and at the Perfect Land Working Group meeting, I believe, was that in order to, we could resource managing a conservation park area, the district of Metchosin, or we could do that in partnership with somebody else. And if we did, our contribution would be the value of the land, and other organizations would bring the value of the management side to it. So that, I think, was the rationale then. I'm not so interested in the partnership with APRM to get funding to do this. I just think it's a responsible thing to do at some point. When I'm looking at our budget, we started with 12.6 and 14 point something, now we're at 15%, tax increase sort of territory. The first question that came from the Bufferland Working Group was, is council wanting to put the resources, or does it have the resources to manage the conservation area? And I think when I look at the budget, I'm thinking, well, there's our answer. It's not even on the budget, and we're at 15%. So that's going to confront us in the finance meeting. And I think that putting the money as a one-time, there somewhere to get an appraisal done at some point makes sense, because we're likely to not manage this ourselves. The cost will be too much to bear with the other priorities that we have already set. I'm not opposed to owning it and running it. It's just we're going to be out of money. So that'll hit us the finance meeting, and we can talk about it there. But I do think an appraisal will be needed, either for a partnership to reduce our costs or for sale. And not sale to become something other than a conservation area, but to confirm and to lock in what we're wanting to have happen.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's general agreement about that. It's if we get to the point, and I'm hoping we're not close to that yet. There's a lot of work still to do to assess, the viability of this as that protective ecological, what do we call it? I'm sorry. Reserve. Or parkland area, green space, whatever. And again, going way back to the beginning of term, the community voted to, as part of the referendum, to protect, to take this on as a green space buffer. So, and I believe we do have an obligation to the Neil Road residents to do what we can to continue with that.
Oh yeah,
so
not speaking against that at all.
For sure.
Just rather the management plan. And it might be, I think it's probably worth for council and committee to see the results of the Bufferland Working Group that have gone to the plan, so we're kind of up to date. That would be a help, if that's possible. And no, I was simply speaking to the notion of the first question wasn't to not have a conservation area, it was, were we going to resource it ourselves?
Yeah.
And that's the question I'm looking at, not the entire layout of the document. And the question was asked, I think, because the working group was sensitive to that question.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm only trying to address that, not the final disposition of the property in terms of its ultimate use or zoning.
Okay, can I have a motion to receive? From Councillor Donaldson, seconded by Councillor Lorette. Thank you very much. All in favor or discussion?
Yeah, okay. Just thanks to Chris Moore and APRM for the offer. I think it's very generous, as Councillor Donaldson has said, and I think I want to recognize that.
Okay, thanks very much. And all in favor? So that carried. And with that, we're done. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Councillor Gray, seconded by Mayor Little. All in favor? Thank you very much.
All hands been up.
Yes. Thank you very much, residents, for your patience, staff, for your patience. Somebody back? Seriously.
Double overtime and nobody's voice came out.